So as I mentioned before the trailer, we typically start off these things with our non-spoiler reactions to the movie. And so if you haven't seen Captain America Brave New World just yet, you're still okay. We're going to spend a few minutes just kind of giving general thoughts and opinions about what we thought about this new feature film. And then after that, we will dive into spoilers and do a character by character breakdown and talk about some of the big major moments from the film. But with all of that said and with all of that out the way, man, I will pass it to you. What do you think about Captain America Brave New World?
Oh boy. Captain America Brave New World. This movie is, I think, the definition of what mid is and what mid exists, I think, to be. This movie, my review is it's a movie. It is the most average thing that you can possibly, I think, put out, I think, into the world. As much so as it's so average that it honestly it feels like episode 7 of the TV show Winter Soldier, or Falcon and Winter Soldier. It's just an upgrade, a somewhat higher budgeted episode of that TV show, which is interesting because I feel the same way about the show. That show was also pretty mid when I think about it. There was a lot of things I didn't like about it. A couple things I did like, and the couple things I did like, they do transfer into this movie a little bit, but it has the same exact issues with this movie that they kind of do in that show. It's so interesting. It's like they didn't learn anything from what happened, I think, in that show in a lot of different ways. I think this film has a lot of unearned moments that happen in it. And it has, of course, questionable visuals at some point. And at other points, it's like okay, and at some other point, it's very shaky, green screen. We've been here, done that, and I think part of my frustration with the film is not only, I think, of course, technical things that we talk about, story things that we talk about, but this is a movie about Captain America during Black History Month on President's Day weekend. It's like they understood the president part of it and forgot the Black History Captain America Black part about the movie. It's like we understood kind of one assignment and then we forgot about the other assignment in lieu of having to bring in all these other plot lines that make everything murky and messy and loud, and it's just a lot going on in this film. There's a lot of cheap thrills in it, and I think it's the type of MCU that some people don't mind. I can understand why some people are like, that was fine for me, or I enjoyed it. I get it, because it's the most average movie you've ever seen. It's a television film. If I had seen this, honestly, to your point, we were talking about earlier with the box office, if I had seen this on TV, I would have been like, okay, cool. That makes sense to me. Had this had just come out on Disney Plus, I'd be like, okay, that makes sense to me. But as a cinematic Marvel experience where we're supposed to be bringing this thing forward and having a new Black Captain America and supposed to be rallying against this dude to lead the Avengers, I think they failed in a lot of different aspects in regards. I don't think it's the worst MCU movie I've ever seen. Actually, there's other movies I definitely dislike more, but this is the definition, I think, of mediocrity. And I think we talked about it over and over. This movie had to be more than that. I remember talking to a boy before. I was like, this movie can't be a 3 out of 5. It cannot afford to be a 3 out of 5. And what's crazy, my Letterboxd score is a 3 out of 5. I'm like, dang, that's exactly what it was for me personally. It has to be something bigger than that, and unfortunately it wasn't bigger than that. But yeah, man, can't wait to get into it. Unfortunately, this movie was just as mid and mediocre as could be.
All right. I guess I will give my thoughts on this movie. So, Captain America Brave New World is peak mediocrity for the Marvel Cinematic Universe. I think this movie sucks. Flat out, full stop. I think it's a bad movie. The script, which has 5 different screenwriters, by the way, is riddled with exposition heavy dialogue that's very boring and uninteresting. The plot is so unnecessarily convoluted. It makes the entire movie feel really choppy and fragmented. And the big thing about this film and previously what we've seen out of other MCU films, the Captain America films in particular, is that the filmmakers behind this are attempting to gesture at the popular political thrillers of the 60s and the 70s. Movies like John Frankenheimer's The Manchurian Candidate, Fred Zinnemann's The Day of the Jackal. These are movies that directly inspired Captain America Brave New World. And Captain America the Winter Soldier a decade ago accomplished this feat much more successfully.
Yeah.
But if you actually think that Captain America Brave New World is a political thriller, I'm sorry, you should probably watch more political thriller movies. This is not a political thriller because, one, there's practically no politics in it. And two, the film has zero intrigue, no surprises, no unexpected twists and turns, no shocking reveals, no espionage. It has none of those elements that make political thrillers the subgenre to cinema that they are. And I think that some of this is attributed to the fact that nearly everything in this movie is given away in the marketing. And if it wasn't at least given away in trailers, it was extremely telegraphed in the movie itself. It actually made you very keen and very aware of what was going to come next. There was no mystery to uncover and to solve. And the entire time that I was watching it, I'm like, where's the suspense? Where's the tension? Where's the dramatic pull that's supposed to really get me to lean in and say, like, oh my goodness, I don't know what's happening here. Who is really pulling the strings? What is the mystery that they're going to uncover? Or at the very least, what are the politics that they're actually trying to explore this movie? What are they trying to say about whatever the instance is, whatever the inciting incident is? They don't explore none of that stuff. It's all extremely half-baked. And I think if you go beyond this, the filmmaking itself for this movie, it doesn't do anything to distinguish itself from so many other movies that we see. In fact, I don't think this movie is well directed at all. And this is no personal shot against Julius Ona, but I think that if there were a more talented director behind this movie, it could have at least made certain aspects of this film better. And I question the direction and the director choice for this movie because Julius Ona, his previous two efforts, Loose and The Cloverfield Paradox, one, those are movies that a lot of people did not see. The Cloverfield Paradox is not a well-received movie. Loose is a pretty good movie, but nobody saw it. And then also on top of that, these are not movies that are political thrillers. These are not movies that actually fall within the genre that he's trying to tackle. And that's not to say that that needs to be a prerequisite, but I do think that there's something to be said about hiring filmmakers that know the subject matter in which they're trying to explore, that are well-versed in this type of storytelling. If you're not at least well-versed in doing political thrillers, I need you to be well-versed at making big-budget blockbusters, making big-budget fantasy films, sci-fi films. Julius Ona has not necessarily done that just yet, and so I just wonder, why are we choosing him to direct this movie? Again, nothing personal, but it makes me question the choice of him, the choice of other people that have directed previous Marvel movies, where it's like, guys, we're pulling people out of somewhat obscurity to make these $200-300 million movies. What are we doing that for? Are we putting them in the best positions possible to succeed, to make these movies as great as they could be? Are we selecting people that actually know this material, that know these types of worlds, that know these types of stories? If you go back to Thor in 2011, Kenneth Branagh doing a Shakespearean-like Thor, well, newsflash, he knew exactly what he was doing. He had made Shakespearean adaptations before. He made Hamlet. He made Othello. He made these movies. He came from British theater. Like, that's why he was the perfect choice for that movie. Why are we not continuing that same thread to today's filmmaking and to today's choices? Even the Russo brothers, they hadn't made big budget blockbuster sci-fi movies before, but you know what they did make? They made ensemble pieces. They made community. They knew character interactions and relationships. That's why we look at Civil War and Endgame and Infinity War, and we can say, like, wow, I love all of these characters and their interactions and their dialogue with each other. They know how to do that stuff extremely well. And I'm just really, really dumbfounded at the choices here and why we're putting these people in these positions to not necessarily succeed, for it to ultimately go through probably multiple rounds of reshoots and patchwork and let's shoehorn this in, let's change this up. It detracts from the vision. It waters it down when you go through all of these different rounds of these multiple iterations of a script and of a story, and it becomes a product that's much lesser than probably how it initially started as. To continue on, per usual, I think a lot of the visual style here feels very muted and flat and uninteresting, especially in the final action sequence, which has some really, really inconsistent CGI. And a lot of the editing in this movie, I feel is also very sloppy and overcut at times and made some of the sequences confusing and almost not legible in order to understand what was happening on screen. The musical score is not memorable at all, which is very, very disappointing. If you go back to all the Captain America movies and even the Falcon and the Winter Soldier, those are really good scores. Those scores are actually really memorable and really good musical soundtracks to the movie. This one doesn't have that. And I think one of my biggest crimes of the film, as I wrap up here, is really what they did to Sam Wilson within the MCU, because this movie's not about him at all. This is not a Sam Wilson movie. His character in this film is merely reacting to everything around him. He doesn't want anything. What does Sam Wilson want in this movie? What's his desire? What's his narrative thrust? What is his purpose now that he is Captain America? We never get any of that information, and he's only reacting to the desires of other characters, particularly Thunderbolt Ross. That's really who has most of the narrative motivation throughout this film. And I just wonder, why are we doing that? Why on the first Sam Wilson Captain America movie are we not truly making it about him and what he wants and where he's at in this current time and in this current place in the MCU? And because of all of that, I think that they have yet to do the work that's actually needed to prove and convince me that Sam Wilson can and should be Captain America. They haven't convinced me yet. I'm not buying into it. I'm not believing in that idea that he should necessarily be Captain America, much less the leader of a future Avengers team. They haven't done any of the work to actually make me believe into that stuff. And so I think ultimately Captain America Brave New World, bottom tier MCU movie for me. And it continues to really exacerbate the very steep decline in quality that we've been experiencing for the past 6 years since Avengers Endgame. 6 years. This is the 35th MCU movie. And I think we really have to think about that. 35 movies, and we're producing this? That just can't be. I just don't understand that. That can't be acceptable. I just don't think that that's like a fine thing to just say like, oh, it's fine. It's okay. They'll be okay. There's more shots. They have this movie coming next. They have that. How long are we going to continue that narrative? We've been saying that same thing for the past 6 years. Like, well, wait till that movie. Wait till these characters come. Wait till that person gets this certain title or this certain project. Guys, it's been 6 years. That's a long time. 35 movies is a lot of movies. We got to stop the bullshit. We got to stop the bullshit and pretending like it's going to get better. I don't think it's going to get better. I really don't at this point. They're not proving to me that it's going to be at that place. And this is also interesting because went on our Instagram and asked people for their reactions to this movie. And I think we're seeing a lot of what I was just talking about, like people just feeling, I guess, soft on it, saying like, it's okay. It's not the worst. It does this well and it doesn't do that well. Like, here's some of the reactions. Looked like a Disney Plus original movie most of the time, but a solid C- to C. I give it a C. I didn't hate it, but I didn't like it either. Very mid, very all over the place. Liked it, didn't love it, a little too predictable. 3 out of 5. A, not great, but not trash. Guys, are we okay with this? Are we fine with this? Like, is this like the place that we want to be with the MCU? How many times have we said those exact same sentiments with other movies over the past 6 years? Movies like Quantumania, movies like Eternals, movies like Black Widow. We've said that same thing over and over. And so I just want to, pivot it back to you and ask you this, like, where are we? Are we at rock bottom right now? Like, is it the worst that it could be for the MCU? Has it been worse in the past? Is it going to get worse in the future? I just want to really take a temperature check on that right now, because this one again, off again, like one movie's great, one movie's not so great. This back and forth, I don't think it's the way. You can't achieve momentum in that way. And we've gotten like, oh, this movie was great, and then this movie isn't so great, back and forth. Whereas the first 23 movies, they weren't all great, but they had streaks going, So I don't know. I'm just thinking a lot about that and just like where the MCU is, especially as we start to close out this saga. Like we're near the end now. And so, what does this all mean? This very, very soft, middling, very mid reaction to the movie. What does this mean for the MCU and just how they progress and make movies moving forward?
Yeah, I think your question is, have we hit rock bottom? I think we might have. I think this is the definition, at least for MCU, what we've got before MCU standard. This is their rock bottom. This is the worst we've gotten. If I look at my letterbox list for MCU Marvel movies ranked, the bottom half is fueled with the last 6 years that you were just talking about. That's not good. We shouldn't be there. I should be able to say, oh man, these couple movies have reached these new heights, or I feel like this movie's better than this movie. And it's funny thinking about it. because when this movie ended, I'm like, dang, I got to throw this back in the pile. I got to throw this movie in the pile of all the other weird middle of the pack, not even middle of the pack, low of the pack MCU tier films that we've gotten over the past couple years. And yeah, and I think that means rock bottom. If it's about streaks, this is a streak in the opposite direction. This is literally a streak in the opposite direction. This is not phase 3 of the MCU. This is something else. And I think it's time to recognize and be honest about that. A lot of people have to be honest about that. And I think some people have looked at it in a vacuum, but I bet you if you ask them the exact same question and they start being like, "Oh, how'd you feel about this movie?" I feel and going back in time, the last 6 or 7 MCU films, I bet you it'd be like, "Dang, everything has been the same," or "I feel the same about everything that's come out. Everything's been mid to bad." And that's a problem that needs to be addressed. I don't know what the MCU is going to do about it. I don't know if they can do anything about it at this point. I don't know if they have the right thought process or direction to do that, you know. And you were just saying, like, how long are we going to keep saying, "Oh, but this movie's coming out and this thing's coming out"? I can't. It's hard to be excited as much as I want to about Fantastic Four, because this thing was kind of supposed to lead me there. Thunderbolts looks fine, but the trailers for Captain America Brave New World were decent. Everybody was like, "Oh yeah, the trailer." And then we get to it and it's like the same old thing again. Is Thunderbolts going to feel the same for us? Probably. There's nothing for me to believe that it won't feel like that. There's nothing for me to believe I'll get into Thunderbolts. I'll be like, "Man, here we go again." And I'll leave the exact same way that I just left Brave New World. And then you're telling me a big movie like Fantastic Four is coming up. You want me to trust you with that? I don't know if I can. I don't know if I get that feeling. Like, again, trailer looks decent. I like the art direction, but I have no actual meat and potatoes from actual films for these past couple of MCU films that make me say, "Yeah, I believe in that movie." It's hard. It's getting harder and harder by the day. So I don't know what they're going to do, how they stand, but I definitely, to answer your question, I do think this is the MCU's definition of rock bottom.
Here's my thing, though. Even if Fantastic Four is great, that doesn't matter. I think the point is that they've produced some great movies in this stretch. You can look back to movies like Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 3, movies like Spider-Man No Way Home, movies like Shang-Chi and the Legend of the Ten Rings. Those have been really, really good movies. The problem is that they follow it up with very mediocre to just complete utter shit movies that we've gotten. And you pointed out phase 3 of the MCU, when practically everything that was coming out, people loved it. It was almost universal acclaim. And even if people didn't love it as much, you just always knew that the box office was just going to come through. The movie was going to be seen by almost everybody. It was going to be successful, even if people didn't feel the warmest about it. And we can't even say that anymore. Now people have wised up. They're like, well, if it's not that good, if it's kind of just like okay to mid, I will just wait. And so my point is that Fantastic Four can be a great movie. In fact, I do think it's probably going to be one of their better efforts that we've seen over the past few years. I just don't think it matters anymore. I think we're at such a place where the inconsistency is so consistent that that's been the narrative. That's what's overtaken how we feel about the MCU, because you look at Fantastic Four, but then, you know, what comes after that? We have to like wait and see what's going to happen with these Avengers movies that have practically had no build up at this point because they decided to pivot over the past year or so. So now we have to like drum up excitement and all of a sudden buy into a narrative and a story that we've practically done no legwork to establish. And so that's already coming from a place of like, damn, we're kind of working from behind again. And so movies like this that add to the narrative of the slump that they've been in, movies like Quantumania and Eternals and Black Widow, and don't even fucking get me started on the shows that have just completely brought down the quality of this entire thing. I think that they're probably the biggest culprits of this whole thing because they've oversaturated the market and they've just not made great TV. That's all overtaking our love and affection of this stuff. Whereas 10 years ago, we only got 2 movies a year. And it was likely that those 2 movies were going to be pretty good. And even if one was really good and the other one wasn't good, again, that box office came through, and then you didn't have all these other things in between that only further brought down the quality of what they were putting out.
Right.
We always could just count on a couple of things, and they can easily bounce back from something that wasn't hugely successful. Things like Thor: The Dark World, or things that performed a little bit softer, like the first Ant-Man. They always followed it up with bangers. Captain America: Civil War came right after Ant-Man, so you just knew, like, we're going to be okay. We're going to be fine, guys. And, you know, even with the exceptions over the past few years, movies like Guardians and movies like Spider-Man No Way Home, like these movies that have done well, just think about the consistent elements across both of those films. They're the third movies in trilogies.
Yep.
They're helmed by filmmakers that were there from the beginning, James
Yep.
Gunn, John Watts. They
Mhm.
are also leaning on, I'll even throw Deadpool and Wolverine in that. Again, another
Mhm.
third movie, another filmmaker that had been there since the first one. They're also leaning on a lot of nostalgia, a lot of goodwill from
Yeah.
previous characters, previous multiversal stuff, all sorts of shenanigans. Like, those are outliers, and I don't think we can keep these in the conversation. We have to look at the basic
Mhm.
MCU movies, like the Captain
Right.
Americas, the Black Widows, those types of
Mhm.
projects, the first outings for a lot of these characters that have just largely been unsuccessful. It's troubling. I think it's really, really troubling where things are and where things are heading, because that's just it's not what you want to see for such a successful franchise that was so good at making movies for such a long time. Now make
Yeah.
I would just say outright bad movies. I think that this is an outright bad movie. I'm not afraid to say it. But let's get into it. Let's talk about this movie in more detail and unpack some of the elements, some of the characters and the plot points. So if you haven't seen Captain America: Brave New World, this is your spoiler warning. Go check out the film, and come back and listen to the rest of our conversation as we dive in and talk about all the nitty gritty with Brave New World. Of course, we should start off with Sam Wilson, who is the new Captain America, the titular character. He's following up behind Steve Rogers. A lot of the narrative tension in terms of Sam becoming Captain America was explored in the Falcon and the Winter Soldier.
Mhm.
That was something that they spent 6 episodes really ironing out, just his journey to accepting that mantle and having to go through a lot of loopholes and dealing with government issues and the John Walker of it all. And then, of course, Bucky, who was there for that entire show, just the factor that he played into that story as well. But now Sam Wilson's firmly Captain America. He is this new symbol. And we see really kind of at the top of this movie, after an opening credit action sequence, he's working with the government. He's in bed with Thaddeus Ross, who is the president now. He is, sort of being that official front-facing superhero for the MCU. So before we just, dive into even more elements of Sam Wilson, I mean, just Anthony Mackie and his presence as the character. He's been around for a while now. He made his debut
Yeah.
in Captain America: The Winter Soldier. He's grown from being a sidekick, essentially, to Steve Rogers, to now being a leader. What were your thoughts just in those opening moments of the movie? Let's say the first 20 minutes, as we start to just kind of firmly see him, be this character, be this mantle, and accept it as well, because a lot of Falcon and the Winter Soldier was him rejecting the idea, but now he's fully accepted it and is kind of come into his own. In some respects, I guess, is this new hero, this new Captain America in the MCU.
What's really actually cool about, I think, Anthony Mackie, again, stepping into the role of Captain America, is that same idea where people are iffy about him in the MCU. Like, can Sam Wilson be Captain America? It felt like the same thing is happening in real life, or was happening in real life, where I know people were asking, like, I don't know about Anthony Mackie being a lead guy. Like, that's a whole thing. Like, people were like, can he do this thing? Can he lead a movie and become, I think, Captain America and be the charismatic person that we need him to be? And what made that so interesting is yet the parallel between the movie and how that was kind of happening in real time, in real life. And I was hoping, I think, when we get to the film and they would kind of play on that thing too, kind of prove both at the same time. Like, yeah, of course Sam Wilson could be Captain America, but I also kind of wanted that same idea. Like, yeah, of course Anthony Mackie could also step into this thing and be the leading man and actually take command of this role as well. And you asked about the opening 20 minutes. I honestly didn't like the start that much. I think there are other parts of the film I was like, okay, this is fine, but the start wasn't one of them. To be honest, it wasn't my favorite beginning, and part of it, I think, was it everything felt weird and loose and disconnected, and we had to do the thing where we started off again. This movie constantly felt like a copy paste of course they're shooting for Winter Soldier over and over, and we start kind of with that same, okay, let's get into a mission, we're doing espionage to show them how Captain America gets in and out. And I don't know, I think I was just looking for something different to start off the film. And so and not only that, but you kind of talk about some of those bad weird editing techniques and cutting, and some of the action in the beginning was like, dang, y'all are cutting a lot, or y'all moving the camera around a lot for me. What is going on? There's these little sliver moments. It's like, okay, that's fine, but overall the action in the beginning was just like, I don't know about this. I think I did enjoy, I think, Anthony Mackie's attitude as Captain America. I was like, okay, cool. He's also paying some homage to Captain America, to Steve Rogers in some moments that you can see with the shield and stuff. That stuff was fine and cool and dandy, but overall, as an opening sequence, I think I was just looking for something less generic. It was just so very generic, like we had seen it before. What were we doing? They even tried to I think make him quippy and have all these other things going down with him, but part of it's the script, part of it's the cut editing, and part of it was like, okay, why are we starting the movie like this? Was there another way that we could have done this that made it more refreshing and less like I had seen it before?
I think all the action in this movie is incredibly forgettable, and it started with this opening sequence. There's no espionage in this. There's no thrills. There's no tension. We don't even really understand and truly know like what are we doing here? Like, what's the point of this sequence in general? And so it started off very, very rocky in the opening stages. Some of the hand to hand was okay at best, but nothing that was something that we hadn't seen before. And it didn't convince me of anything in terms of just like where the story was kicking off from and what the potential threat would be for the remainder of the movie. It just was all, it felt like hastily thrown together and very much like an afterthought. So I automatically did not buy into this opening sequence at all. To the point about Anthony Mackie as this new hero in the MCU and taking up the mantle and going on this journey, you know, Anthony Mackie as a personality is somebody that I do like. He feels like a fun person to be around. He is super charismatic. If you watch his interviews, if you see him just interacting with other people, he can think quickly. He's very witty. He can be off the cuff. He can be funny. He can do all of those things. And at some times we've gotten a chance to see glimpses of that in the MCU, but not fully unleashed. And I just don't understand why we don't lean into more of the personality of who he just is as a person, because I think that would be the most successful iteration of a Sam Wilson. He doesn't have to be overly serious and super self-serving. Just make him more like how Anthony Mackie is in real life. And some may say like, oh, well, that's not being a character. That's just him acting like himself. Newsflash, guys, it happens all the time. There are many actors who just portray themselves, and a lot of times it works because they just know how to tap into that side of themselves. And if you're trying to get us to believe and buy into who this character is as an audience, you got to do a little bit more to get me on that train, because right now, I'm not convinced that Sam Wilson is supposed to be the de facto leader of the Avengers. I think he's been done a disservice as a character, and he's yet to be presented as the next guy up to be calling the shots for whoever this next iteration of heroes is going to be. And I thought about this while watching the movie. Think about every time we saw Steve Rogers in the MCU. This won't be my last comparison to Steve Rogers because that's the blueprint right now.
Yeah.
But think about every appearance of Steve Rogers in the MCU. We saw him leading a team. In Captain America, the First Avenger, he leads the Howling Commandos. In both Avengers and Avengers Age of Ultron, of course, he's leading the Avengers. Captain America, the Winter Soldier, he's leading the smaller team of Black Widow and Falcon, of course. And then back to Infinity War and Endgame, he's leading multiple variations of Avengers teams. What team have we seen Sam Wilson lead at this point? Who has he been in charge of outside of this new Falcon played by Danny Ramirez? He's not been the leader of a team just yet. Why not take the opportunity in this movie to put together a smaller team so we can see his leadership capabilities, so we can see him calling the shots for multiple different heroes, not just one person, but multiple different people. I think that that's a really, really important element to getting us to buy into like who Captain America is for the MCU. Like, why should anybody listen to him? Why should anybody listen to Sam? What experience does he have? You know, for people to say like, yeah, we're gonna follow behind that guy on the battlefield. And I just don't think that they did that. And you know, as I pointed out earlier in the non-spoiler review, you know, he's not the focus of this movie. He's not the emotional center. You know, and I think that they try to do some stuff with him and Isaiah Bradley, but they don't really make him the emotional center of the movie. And instead they pivot that to Thunderbolt Ross. And so I guess it's just like a follow-up, you know, Sam's position now in this movie and then after this movie, like, what does it take to get him to that next level for I think everybody to believe like that this guy is like the next leader? Because I've talked to several people and people are like, yeah, you know, Anthony Mackie's not it for me. He's not meeting that certain quality, and it's not his fault. I'm not putting this on his shoulders.
Yeah,
I'm putting this on the shoulders of the writing and the filmmakers. Like, what does it take for everybody to look at a character to say like that's the one that's in charge? You know, that because even for me, I'll be honest, like after the first Avengers movie, I wasn't a big fan of Steve Rogers as the leader. I'm like, no, it's fucking Robert Downey Jr. because they had just done so much with his character, right? But as soon as you get to Winter Soldier and they
Yeah.
add the darkness to the story and they add the
Mhm.
darkness to Steve Rogers, you know, some of the more morally questionable things, I'm like, oh, that's somebody I'm interested in. So I'm just curious on your thoughts on that. Just like what does it take to get us to be in a space where we believe that he can be the next leader of the Avengers team?
No, it's funny. I was gonna bring up the exact same thing. In Cap's first showing in the first Avenger, I was not sold on Captain America. I was like, okay, cool. Like, I wasn't like, this guy's gonna lead them. It took me a while to get there, and I think similar to you, I think it did happen in Winter Soldier. I was like, oh, that's what they're going for here, or that's Cap. That's the Cap that I think they've been shooting for. And in here, I think the same thing is happening. Nobody is sold. I'm not sold at all in a lot of ways. I think it does take what you just said. You have to take Sam Wilson and show that he's able to lead in different ways. He has all this experience being in the military and all these other things. And in a lot of ways, we never get to see that leadership of what that looks like. If Cap handed him this mantle, I feel like a lot of those leadership responsibilities should have carried over to him, but it never feels like it. He still kind of feels like Falcon in a lot of ways, where he's just the gun for hire. You know what I'm saying? Like this dude where it's like, we need a mission and it's in the air. We call Falcon. But now instead they just add Captain America onto it. It still feels the same. I don't feel like America's hero was really coming in to do this thing, do this big noble, I'm about to lead these people to glory and to greatness. It doesn't necessarily feel like that. And what's funny is they kind of tried to do it in that first fight. Like by the end of that first fight, he's dapping up the army guard, or the other army military people. Everybody's like, thank you, Cap. And of course Joaquin Torres is there as like the new Falcon, and they're kind of trying to do it, but it's not in the same way. Nothing in this film had that same, I think, weight that Winter Soldier had. It's not as personal. It needed to be personal, and that's what it meant to see Cap rise to the top as the Winter Soldier. Literally, Bucky was personal as hell for that dude. Like, he had to kind of bring out some new ways of leadership. He had to both reckon with himself and his past, while simultaneously trying to quote unquote save the world and people around him. And I think Falcon, sure, he is trying to save the people around him, but there's nothing personal. And I think that's important to show in a new Captain America. Sometimes you got to make it personal, and Cap definitely showed us that. Steve Rogers definitely showed us that. Like, sometimes it has to be personal, and it's that personality, that very specific intimateness that shows you you can be a leader when things get tough, and they didn't do that.
It should always be personal. If it's not personal, it's not interesting. Why would I care? Why would I give a fuck? It should always be personal to the character and to what they've been through. And the army and everybody following him in the beginning, that they don't count because they're following orders. He outranks them. Mm-hmm. They have to follow him. I want to see somebody choosing to follow Sam Wilson, making the choice to say, I believe in him as the person that can lead us to victory. Mm-hmm. And everybody chose Steve Rogers in those first few movies. Even in Avengers Age of Ultron, you have that moment in the beginning of the movie where Tony Stark is like, "Oh, I'm not in charge. He's in charge. I just pay for everything." That was an admission that I'm not calling the shots here, guys. I don't know how to do that, but I can provide you infinite amount of resources so that we can make sure we got the best technology in the world. So if Ultron comes, we can deal with it, so on and so forth. But nobody's choosing to necessarily follow him if it's not a direct order that they have to follow because they're a part of the military. And so all of that stuff is just, I think there's still just so much left to be desired. The one difference maker for Sam Wilson as a character that they only tiptoe in this movie is the fact that he has an experience with counseling and experience with therapy, and that he can talk and relate to people. They did a lot more of that in the Falcon and the Winter Soldier, which I give that show credit for exploring that stuff. There's not really any time to do that here, but that's the key difference between him and a Steve Rogers. In fact, it's funny because by Avengers Endgame, Steve Rogers had sort of taken up that responsibility to be a counselor. We see him sitting down and having that therapy session in post-snap era of the MCU at that point, because Sam wasn't around to do it. He couldn't talk to retired military vets or people that had been affected by the snap. So it felt like Steve was kind of following in his footsteps and aspiring to be something more. And so that's like the one thing that makes Sam really, really special. And they don't tap into it much at all here. and that's just like a big missed opportunity. Whereas in the Falcon and the Winter Soldier, we did see that. As bad as a villain as I think the Carly Morgenthau stuff was, there were moments in that show when he could talk to her and he could try to relate to her and break through with her that other people couldn't do in that particular instance. And so maybe that's the difference maker. Maybe that's the way that we make him feel like his own hero. But where is that stuff going to come into play? Because it didn't come into play, I think, in this movie at all. Also, in the opening moments, when they go to visit the White House, we saw this in the marketing and the trailers. Thunderbolt Ross, played by Harrison Ford now, the great Harrison Ford, he asks Sam for his help in reassembling the Avengers. And we've been talking for, it feels like years now, about what are the Avengers? Where are the Avengers? Who are the Avengers? Are the Avengers even a thing in this universe anymore? And it's mostly been shown to us that no, they have not, and they won't be until those Avengers movies come back around. In fact, the brand new Thunderbolts trailer just basically pointed out to us, the Avengers are not coming, guys, so we need a new team. But he does ask that question of Sam, considering he is going to, I guess, be the leader. What were your thoughts on just like adding that to this movie and just like having that be, I guess, somewhat of the jumping off point for this new relationship between him and Thunderbolt Ross? Because historically, him and Ross have not seen eye to eye. He pointed out the fact that Ross was chasing them for a couple of years after the Sokovia Accords, but now he wants to work together with Sam to reestablish the Avengers and almost make them somewhat, I guess, employees of the government, which they haven't historically been. They largely operated as their own entity, which necessitated the Sokovia Accords eventually within the story. Right. So what were your thoughts on just like that little tidbit being thrown into the movie to start to, I guess, unpack that conversation of what the next Avengers are going to look like?
It's so weird because I think I do like that idea of that happening. I don't like the way they went about it. I don't like how easy it made us seem or how quickly we got there. Instead of, like you just said it in the movie, it was kind of like, we need you to restart. I want you to restart the Avengers. And then, of course, Sam Wilson goes back. I think he was telling Joaquin this, but he was like, I don't know, because then we'll have to work for him. He was like, I don't know about restarting because then we'll have to work for him. And then that was kind of it. That was kind of like the end of the conversation, because part of me really does like the conversation. Like, whoa, that's actually a lot of stuff in crazy history here to where should you even be talking to this dude? And one, I feel like we missed. Part of me doesn't like that we kind of skipped over that part. We opened this movie and we're already working with Thaddeus Ross instead of like, I don't know if I should be doing this. Like, and part of me feels like we skipped that. And then part of me feels like, okay, so we're not going to talk about that any further, because those are really good points, I think, being brought up. The Sokovia Accords are important. Say, if you do form the Avengers, other Thaddeus Ross having to work for him, that's an important idea, because in a lot of ways, it's probably how Thunderbolts are born. You know what I'm saying? So it's like, why aren't we taking time to discuss these things? I mean, I know why. After seeing the movie, there's so much shit happening in the movie, but I feel like, dang, and in some ways that should have been the conversation, and it just kind of isn't. So I like the idea, just really hate the execution.
Yeah, when Thaddeus asks him, when he asks Sam to restart the Avengers, and then the movie concludes a couple of short hours later, I'm like, well, why was that in the movie? Why was that line in the script of the movie? Because it's completely unexplored for the remainder of the story. They do nothing with it. And that's really, really confusing to me, because it just doesn't fit with the story that they were trying to tell here. So I question, like, why even have that in the scripts? Like, was that just a function of the marketing? Like, let's just like throw in that breadcrumb to let people know we're thinking about this, but we're not ready to unpack it because we probably don't even know yet. We haven't even fully figured out like what the Avengers are, because I imagine a movie like where you have to throw in a lot more elements to make it more interesting. This is just very surface level, but I imagine a movie in which Sam does have to start the conversation and the work of restarting the Avengers. What does that look like? That's kind of a movie unto itself. Let's have that conversation of him trying to get back the heroes together, because shit's about to get very, very, very sticky for them. So what do those conversations with respective heroes look like? Who are we identifying to be a part of this team? Where are they even in the world? I don't even know where half of these folks are. Some are off-world, some are intergalactic, probably parallel universes. Like, what does that stuff even look like? That's a lot of interesting material, and none of it is explored in this movie. Not that it has to be, but as soon as you include a line like that, I'm expecting you to deliver upon it in some way. I'm expecting some element of payoff at some point, like, well, they're at least going to catapult us to the next thing that's going to really, really explore it. And then they never do. All they do is add in a couple of other lines about how Sam feels about it. That's just not enough. And so I was just like, well, why even put this in the film? It just was really unnecessary, just like an unnecessary misstep that would get people's expectations up high, only for it to not deliver. How do you feel about Sam's costume? This is. I mean, we see a variation of the original from the Falcon and the Winter Soldier with the white. Then he has like a darker blue one. He got the wings. He got the helmet. How did you feel about just like the look of Sam Wilson throughout the movie?
I like the dark blue one, that main dark blue one we see when they're in the air. It's cool. That's really it. It's fine. I still, even at the end of Falcon and Winter Soldier, I wasn't completely sold. It was just like, this is okay. Honestly, my favorite part of the suit is the vibranium wings. I think that's cool. I think that's a cool comic booky thing to throw in there, but it's just fine. I don't hate it. I don't love it. It's just like, it's a suit. It's just like, eh.
I don't like that nothing belongs to him. The wings are vibranium and Wakandan. Yeah. The helmet belongs to Ant-Man. The shield belongs to Steve Rogers. Nothing is his. Nothing is of his own making. I don't like that. I just don't. That, like, there's nothing personal to the suit about Sam Wilson. Again, a disservice to the character. What is the personal thing to him? You could say the wings. Yes, the original wings, that was the case, but now they are laced with vibranium because he's not taking the serum, which I also now have questions about. Yep. I don't know if we should be moving in a world with a Captain America that doesn't have a serum.
Doesn't have a serum.
Like, what are we doing? What sense does that make? Especially after you see how this movie goes and you see how the fights go and this Red Hulk shit we'll get to in a second. Like, does it even make sense for Captain America to not, like, Isaiah has it, Bucky has it, Steve has it. There's no shame in this fucking serum at this point, my guy. Like, what are you proving to anybody by not taking it, that you could just hold up in a fight? You were getting your ass kicked quite a lot, and I just don't know how far you're going to be able to take his hand-to-hand combat, his fighting abilities, all that stuff. Like, I don't know how far you could take it with him not being on some sort of serum that can help him and aid him throughout future conflicts and future battles that he's ultimately going to have to face.
Yeah, it's weird, man. Part of me even wishes, as much as they joke about it in the movie, it's also a very serious thing to contend with, and I think they have made it a little bit serious every now and then. They even made it serious when him and Bucky have a conversation. It's like, it's a little serious, like, y'all got the serum and I don't have the serum. It's like, okay, but why not? Like, what is? I just want to come to the big conclusion of, like, this is the exact reason I'm not taking this. Like, if you're not going to take it, I think I need some overwhelming understanding reason why you're not taking it. And instead they kind of just say, it's going to fundamentally change his identity and he won't be as a relatable hero. And I don't know, it's just not believable enough in either direction of why he's not taking the serum.
Yeah, I don't buy that at all. They tapped into a little bit of that in the Falcon and the Winter Soldier. There's that conversation that John Walker has and with his partner and basically unpacking the idea that the serum just makes you more of who you are. So if you're a terrible person, those qualities are likely just going to be amplified based on the serum. And that's essentially what happened with John Walker. It was sort of a cautionary tale. And I think that's interesting. That's a cool idea. Mm-hmm. Sam has showed us that he's a pretty decent guy. Like, he's a pretty good person. Serum, dog. Just take the fucking serum. Like, what are you proving to anybody by not taking it at this point? Steve Rogers took it decades and decades ago, and some people may question certain things that he did. You can question the whole Bucky relationship and withholding information from Tony. We can have that conversation, but Steve never did anything that I ever thought was blatantly evil or egregious to make me question his character truly. And so he was able to withhold, a lot of pride and honor within himself, even with the serum. And so I just don't understand, like, Sam, from what we've seen so far, you're a good guy. I trust you in that respect. Just take the fucking serum, dude. Like, I don't understand, like, why we're holding that out, because I don't know. It would just add a lot more, I think, to what we can see with this character. Let's move on to Thaddeus Ross, Thunderbolt Ross. again, played by Harrison Ford, stepping in, following William Hurt. And this is the most time we've spent with this character thus far really in the MCU. Had a big presence in the Incredible Hulk movie. One of the villains of that film, but then mostly kind of a bit part in future films like Captain America: Civil War, popped up in Black Widow, popped up in Infinity War. Really, just kind of an authority figure, hunting the Avengers for a lot of his existence. Being a government figure, creating the Sokovia Accords, helping to quote unquote tear the Avengers apart, as Sam said. But here, there's somewhat of a different motivation for Thunderbolt Ross. We see him now as the president of the United States, the highest office in the land, and he wants to work with Sam Wilson. He wants to restart the Avengers. There's also this whole story about the adamantium within the Celestial that he's really, really trying to make a priority for his office tenure, to sign this treaty on who can mine adamantium from Celestial Island. These are the utmost priorities from an official standpoint, but then also the personal priority for him as a character is this relationship with his daughter. I want to get to that stuff in a second, but just start off, like, what were your thoughts on Harrison Ford coming in here? Because this is the first time we've seen him in this role. Obviously a recast here, but Harrison Ford, legendary actor, one of the most celebrated actors of the 20th and 21st century, coming into the MCU here to play this pretty well-known character that we've seen so far. What did you think about his performance?
Harrison Ford is 82 years old. He easily could have phoned this thing in, but he didn't. He actually didn't phone it in. I was surprised to see that he didn't phone it in. I think in the ways in which he did, he actually kind of got into the character. He actually brought a little bit of something, I think, to Thaddeus Ross into the movie and his whole ordeal, what he had going on. So I think impressed in that way. Of course, Harrison Ford, like you said, wasn't the greatest to do very big actor, but I just didn't expect him, I think, to have the depth that he went for in this film. I think I was surprised a little bit. They gave him a ton to do. I think the only thing that was crazy, I think, about Harrison Ford was when you see the coming down of the Red Hulk. It was like, dang, this dude is old. You're just like, oh man, this dude is aged. I don't know if he can. He needs to be on a beach somewhere. Long story short, Harrison Ford needs to be retired, kicking up his feet with the coconut drink in his hand. I cannot believe he did this movie. I'm grateful that he's here. It was like, cool, Harrison Ford, get your money. But yeah, I was just very impressed that he decided to show up and give us a little bit of depth with Thaddeus Ross in this film.
I mean, if Harrison Ford wants to work, I'm here for it. Work,
Yeah,
and do your thing. He's working here. He's in another Indiana Jones movie that came out a couple of years ago. He's in the Taylor Sheridan universe, the 1923 show. He's on Shrinking on Apple TV Plus. Like, it doesn't appear that he wants to retire, and I completely respect that. And him wanting to just be active as much as possible and to have fun and do things that are different and maybe interesting for him. And I will say he doesn't phone it in here. He certainly could have, and it doesn't appear that he did, especially for him to be in his really advanced age to come in and to give, at least try to give the character some emotional beats, some resonance. Like, I can feel the effort on the part of Harrison Ford, and I really, really appreciate that from a performance standpoint. And it also just makes a lot of thematic sense as well. Like, if there's anybody to recast William Hurt with in this particular story and movie, Harrison Ford is a good logical choice. He's been in this genre before. He's done the Jack Ryan movies, Clear and Present Danger, and Patriot Games. He's been the president before in Air Force One. This all is also just like nice narrative, creative callbacks to those previous films that he's done. All good films. And to tie that into, something that's trying and aspiring to be more of a political thriller, I get the idea. Now, the execution does not land whatsoever in that respect, but Harrison Ford seemingly showed up and tried to understand the assignment and tried to give this the weight behind the character that I think you would want to feel in this particular story. But when you talk about the story itself, there's a couple of things to break down the Thaddeus Ross character from a few different angles. And, for me, I think my big problem with his character is the fact that he is the emotional centerpiece of the movie. And that choice in and of itself shouldn't be a problem. But the issue is that the Thaddeus Ross character prior to this film has never been that interesting of a character in the MCU. All he has been is an authority figure. He's not necessarily been somebody that's been complex and intricately drawn. Like, it's been very, very basic. He's after the Avengers. He's chasing Avengers. He's chasing Black Widow across the world. He's chasing Steve Rogers. He's trying to get them to sign these documents. That's not really that interesting material for that type of
Mm-hmm.
character. And so to now all of a sudden make him the emotional centerpiece, again, I question why and why in this movie, because we don't really have a relationship with him. We really don't, if you think about it, if you unpack it. Like, he's not a character that's been fleshed out all that much. He's not somebody I particularly care about. Even if Harrison Ford is giving 100% to try to make me get there, I just never got there with that particular thing. And I think that's mostly illustrated in the whole Betty Ross of it all. Him trying to reconnect with her and feeling disconnected and her not speaking with him. We've not seen Liv Tyler in an MCU movie in 17 years. Again, another forgotten MCU movie. Who gives a fuck? That's my question. Who cares? Who cares about any of this stuff? They haven't unpacked Betty and Thaddeus' relationship whatsoever since The Incredible Hulk. So why is that the centerpiece of this movie? And why should people care about that? Why is that going to draw people in? So I don't know. What are your thoughts on just like that being kind of the emotional thrust of his character and for a lot of the story of the film?
Yeah, I definitely agree on the the Betty stuff. It was like, if you weren't there 17 years ago, or you haven't seen that film, you were probably just like, and why should I care about this again? What's going on here? And in fact, when they actually brought it up, I thought we would see her, I think, earlier in the film. Like, I actually thought they were like going to do something else for that character to say, hey, she's here. They have an estranged relationship. I thought they would have a conversation earlier in the film, and they don't. So I thought they were going to go even a little deeper with it. But by the end of it, I'm like, so did we have to do this? Did we have to do, I think, the Betty stuff? I think, at least in the way in which they did it, if we had backed up and said Thaddeus Ross is that figure that you speak of, is the guy that's just kind of a figurehead. He's just the president. And I think we've seen in a lot of different comic book mediums, TV show mediums, where the president, you know him as a character, you see him on screen, he has lines, but we're not jumping into the emotional depth of what the president is going through in certain situations. We've seen that character, I think, numerous times. I think if they had done that and focused less on that, maybe we could have gotten something else out of what was happening with Anthony Mackie. Maybe we could have had more time to spend with him and with the things that he's wrestling and got more personal with that stuff. That's my issue with, I think, that is raw stuff, is it takes up so much time that it's like, okay, but why is it taking up so much time? And it's weird when you look at the movie, because you say Harrison Ford, he's doing really good. He's like, I'm like, okay, I understand that. I understand his sickness. I understand why he's doing these weird things or these other things. So I'm like, why does he feel more important than Sam? Why is this debacle that he's having, this in the other kind of political stuff that he's going through? Why does this feel more important than what Sam and we'll talk about a little bit, but him and Isaiah Bradley are going through? It felt more. Why does that have more gravity than the titular character? I don't know. It was weird for me to contend with, because it's like, in a vacuum, it was like, okay, that's cool, but when you look at the grand scheme of the movie, I just couldn't figure out why we were there.
With the Thaddeus Ross stuff as well, we talked about the whole Avengers line and restarting the Avengers, and that being a desire of his. Another desire of his is the mining of adamantium, this new resource that they have identified and found on Celestial Island. Before we really get into it, what do you think about adamantium now being in the MCU? Because legally they can say it now. We can say adamantium, that's largely been a mutant thing, related thing, and they couldn't really introduce it. But now we know mutants are on the horizon. We've already seen them technically in Deadpool and Wolverine, and so now they're using the Celestial Island story from Eternals to bring in adamantium into the MCU. What are your thoughts on that?
It's interesting. This is not where adamantium comes from in the comics at all. And I'm welcome to new ideas and new origins for things, but I don't know if this is my favorite way to go about it, especially when, there's just a lot more to it. Especially so, and adamantium comes from a mix of Captain America, Black Panther, and scientists in the lab and the shield and all of that stuff. And it's so interesting that we literally have almost all of those same components in this movie, and now it comes from an Eternal or like a Celestial in the ocean. Does that make sense? It's like we had all these components in which the original adamantium came from in the comics in the same movie, but it doesn't come from none of those things. It comes from an Eternal.
Well, the problem is they substituted
in the
adamantium for vibranium for so long. Basically, all those elements that you mentioned, they basically said like, well, it's vibranium instead of adamantium, which is just another metal resource essentially.
Yeah, which they kind of tore up in the first place, but I guess they couldn't say anything about adamantium being a thing. So part of me is just like, they're trying to clean it up and do new things. But yeah, it's a little disappointing. I ain't gonna lie to you. It's like, oh, that's what's happening here. I think there were ways to make it cool, but I don't think this movie did it.
Yeah, when he first set the line, in the story, there were some people in the theater that clapped, and I was just confused. Like, why are we clapping for fucking adamantium that we know nothing about at all yet? Like, as a comics nerd, you know about it, but you don't even know what purpose it's actually going to serve in this story. Because of what you just said, a lot of the purposes that it served in publishing has already been filled in. We've already filled in those gaps because they had to substitute it for something. The shield had to be made out of something because they couldn't say adamantium in 2011. They had to go ahead and say, like, oh, it's vibranium. You know, all the same stuff with Wakanda and Black Panther. And so my thing about this adamantium line, while it could portend really, really cool stuff in the future, the potential Wolverine connections, of course, that's the most well-known usage of adamantium is the exoskeleton of Wolverine, of course, but we don't even have any insight as to what that stuff is going to look like. So right now it's just another MacGuffin. It's just another thing that's just tossed out as a line in a movie. It doesn't mean anything. And I think that that's really the big problem with this whole subplot, which becomes the focal point of the movie. Thunderbolt Ross wants to work with other countries, particularly Japan for some reason, to mine adamantium from Celestial Island. First of all, why? Why are we mining adamantium? That's never talked about in the movie. I could suspect and guess why. They never unpack that. Why are we? What's so important about this? That it's just a potentially invaluable resource? We don't even know what we can do with it just yet. We have to mine it to see, I guess, but they don't even unpack that. On top of the fact that they are mining it from Celestial Island, which first appeared in Eternals a few years ago. People and fans have been begging for them to address this. The fact that a fucking Celestial almost cracked the Earth in half. Like, that really happened. They finally come back to it in this movie. However, they spend no time actually talking about the matter and the issue at hand. Hey, guys, a Celestial, emerged and almost destroyed the planet. Also followed by another Celestial that appeared. Erisham, the judge, said, I'm coming to judge Earth. Nobody's talking about that. Like, why that in and of itself is important. Like, guys, Celestials exist? Like, this is a real thing. All we're concerned about in this movie is mining adamantium. We're not preoccupied with the idea that there are beings out here that we cannot explain, that are beyond our comprehension. What the fuck is going on? That stuff is never talked about. So, no, we have still not unpacked and addressed that loose end from Eternals. That still's not been explored. It's literally just been used as a device to introduce another thing, another MacGuffin that we don't know what we're capable of using it for. We don't know its power. We don't know its potential. None of that shit. If you're going to have a MacGuffin in a movie, we have to know why it's important. The Infinity Stones, those are MacGuffins. We know what they're capable of. We know exactly what the Infinity Stones can do. Never is that explored or explained here. So again, another question. Big question mark. Why? Why is it here? What's the purpose? What is it going to be used for? And I just felt like all of that stuff was underbaked and left on the table, and we just didn't do anything with it.
Yeah, it's very similar to what we were just talking about with the Avengers line in a lot of ways. It's just like, so we're just going to bring it up, and then that's it at the end of the day. And I think they're literally just trying to plant small Easter eggs to get us to X-Men and Wolverine eventually. But I think there's ways to go about it, like you said, to tell us why this metal is so important. Why are we about to go to war over this stuff? Like, I think we need to know why we're about to go to war over this. Did somebody get a sample of it and put it in the lab, and now we understand all these crazy properties about to come from it? Is that why we're battling?
Tell me something.
Over adamantium? Because if that's the case, then cool. All right, let's go do it then. And even Harrison Ford, Thaddeus Ross gets so mad in the movie too. Like, if anybody's going to control adamantium, it's going to be us. And I'm like, but why? Do you even know why you're so passionate about this adamantium, Mr. President?
He definitely does not know why. He does not know why.
Or do you just want to be first. Like, are we just that childish? It's like, I want to be first. It has to be mine. And that's what it feels like. It just feels like it has to be mine. I want to be first.
And say that if that's the case, like, we're America, we need to get our hands on it first. We need to be the leading.
Accurate.
We need 1,000%, 1,000%. We need to be the leading experts on this before Japan gets to it. Before and also, like, why is it Japan? I don't understand that. If everybody is so desperate to mine adamantium, where's Russia? Where's China? Where's Korea? We don't explore any other country besides Japan. Japan becomes a proxy for the rest of the fucking world. That makes no sense. That's literally like a nonsensical thing to do. That it's basically 2 or 3 countries are the only ones that decide to go after adamantium. This would be a world issue when you have a celestial literally sticking out of the fucking Indian Ocean. Like, what are we talking about here? This is just like basic, simple shit that they just don't ever talk about or explore in the movie. I just can't believe, and maybe, I don't know, maybe I'm asking too much of a superhero comic book movie, but I just feel like this is basic stuff. I don't feel like it's like that much of a huge ask to at least have a line or two, or to have some sort of motivation to where we can start to really just like think about these questions. Because if we're thinking about these questions and we're asking these questions as audience members, I think it makes me feel like that the movie isn't that well thought out. I feel like if we're starting to pick it apart in this manner, they needed to add a little bit more. Like, this needed to cook a little bit longer for it to actually make sense within the context of the story and where this universe is and where the world is. And it felt completely unaddressed for a lot of this stuff. Red Hulk. He becomes Red Hulk in this movie. We saw 95% of this stuff in the trailers. There were almost no surprises with his appearance. We saw him one time at the end of the movie. What are your thoughts on Red Hulk? You know, now being the first official introduction of this character in this MCU. I know it's a pretty recent creation in the comics. Like, Red Hulk hasn't been around for like 70 years. It's mostly like somewhat of a recent thing. And people kind of wanted to see Red Hulk and, you know, kind of get back to a Hulk that would Hulk out and be angry, because we haven't gotten that a lot for Bruce Banner. But thoughts on you know, Thaddeus Ross ultimately becoming Red Hulk at the end of this movie?
Red Hulk is a cool character. I like that his skin burns. And they do add that detail to the visuals in this movie. I'm like, that's really cool that his skin burns. I like that. The CGI with the him in general look fine. I think he looked I remember the trailers, I was like, ooh, I don't know. I don't know what's gonna happen. But in the actual film, the actual look of Red Hulk, it looked pretty good. Now the stuff around him, I don't know about the battle and the stuff around him and the whole greens. I don't know about stuff around him, but he himself, I think they did pretty good. Red Hulk looked good. I liked his size. It sounds crazy, but his neck muscles looked pretty decent.
That stuff matters for sure.
Yeah, that stuff matters. All of that looked pretty good. I also kind of like the small detail that he can kind of be like penetrated, right? Versus like he can be stabbed, versus like the Incredible Hulk can't. Like the Hulk that we know can't be stabbed, and that's the difference, I think, between Red Hulk and Incredible Hulk. And also, Red Hulk has like heat wave powers, but he was Hulk for the first time, so he wouldn't be able to do any of that heat power stuff. I don't like that we had to see him in the marketing. I think that disappoints me a little bit, and I know it's like we have to, in order for people to come see this movie, we got to add something else. Like, we got to put Red Hulk in the forefront of this thing. We got to put him on every poster. He needs to be in the trailers. But to actually see him kind of Hulk out for the first time in the theater would have been a nice touch. It would have been like, oh my God, what is happening? And we don't have those moments to ourselves anymore. Everything is just kind of in the trailer in order to get butts and seats. And because when you tell me, or when you do something like that, I'm like, oh, you got something else for me then. Like, if you tell me you got this big thing coming out, that means there's something else. And there wasn't. It was just like, oh, that's it. Like, he hulked out and that was it. That's the one time you see him kind of do the thing. So yeah, man, it's really weird. But yeah, it was cool to see him. It's just unfortunate that the ways in which we've seen him, the reason in which we've seen him, and that was, you know, kind of it. It was like, oh, here's Red Hulk, and now it's like, goodbye, Red Hulk.
Yeah, the look was good. The design of the creature, of the character, was good. The mocap of Harrison Ford, you can still see Harrison Ford's face and characteristics and mannerisms in the performance. All that stuff was good. They've kind of perfected that. They perfected that 12, 13 years ago with Mark Ruffalo stepping into the role. But the usage of the character was so supremely underwhelming in this movie because they spoiled everything in the marketing. And I mean, he's all over every fucking poster. He's got popcorn buckets. He's in commercials, like all sorts of ads and spots, as if he's like the co-lead of the movie. You would think that
Mm-hmm.
Sam and Red Hulk go on missions together, as if that's going to be like the majority of the movie, and that's just not the case. And I
Yeah.
never expected that, just because I followed this stuff a little bit more. I always knew it was going to be
Mm-hmm.
very, very minimal. But I think even for me, somebody in the know, and certainly for probably just a general audience member who likely saw Red Hulk over everything, to know that he was just reduced down to this 5 or 6 minute action sequence at the end where we really can't even unpack and really explore his full capabilities as a character, it was extremely disappointing, because he somehow got beat by Sam Wilson, which again makes no fucking sense. It just doesn't track at all that Sam can outthink, I guess, and outsmart and ultimately talk down Red Hulk. Like, that's the resolution to get Red Hulk to transition back to Thaddeus Ross. Sam just has a heart to heart with him. Really, that works. Like, for a Hulk, a raging, furious Hulk, that's all of a sudden fine enough. It's practically the same bullshit that they did with Natasha in Avengers: Age of Ultron.
Mm-hmm.
Hey, big guy, sun's getting low. They just don't want to write those words, but it's the same fucking thing. And I'm just
Same
like,
thing.
really, that's what we're doing here. The heat stuff, they started to kind of explore it. Like you said, you could see some of the heat radiate off of it. That can go further if they wanted it to, but I mean, if you just went further in this movie, it'd be the fucking apocalypse in DC. They probably just they had to have some restraint to not have everybody burned alive at the stake. But all of it was
White House
just
down.
it was literally White House down, fucking all of that stuff. Angel is falling. Yeah, it would be a fucking Independence Day, just pure apocalyptic stuff. But it was a massive letdown. And yeah, don't get me started on the CGI with the cherry blossom stuff. Just, my God, some of those sequences, some of those scenes look so bad. The shots of Sam trying to talk to him were clearly on a soundstage, clearly in front of green screen. Hey, why don't we maybe like add real cherry blossom trees? Let's just like make them. We probably can't go somewhere to film that stuff, but let's just make some practical cherry blossom trees. No, it's all CGI. Yo, we just saw John Wick 4 and they had a real cherry blossom tree. You remember that scene?
Yeah.
It's one of the most gorgeous scenes
Beautiful.
in the fucking movie. Why can't these movies look like that? Why can't we aspire to that level of visual clarity and style and color? We don't get anywhere in that league in most of these movies, and certainly much less this movie. So it's just all like, yo, what are we doing? This is like huge blockbuster filmmaking. It's supposed to be at the highest level, and it never hit those levels to me. Let's keep moving. Carl Lumbly, Isaiah Bradley, he comes back. We first saw him in The Falcon and the Winter Soldier. He's important in this story because, he still obviously has a relationship with Sam. They train together. Isaiah Bradley is historically a super soldier. He was experimented on, held in captivity by the government, all sorts of stuff, but he's the forgotten Captain America. That's how they describe him. In this movie, there is some sort of nefarious plot going on from Samuel Stearns, played by Tim Blake Nelson. There's mind control. He tries to assassinate the president. That kicks off the whole conflict of the movie. Isaiah Bradley is at the White House, and all of a sudden he loses control of his faculties, tries to take out the president, goes in solitary confinement until he's going to have a sentence. He's facing the death penalty. All that stuff is at play. What did you think about Carl Lumbly's performance, and just like how they use him as a character here to be kind of that person that kicked off what the main plot ultimately was going to entail?
I think Isaiah Bradley as a character is so interesting, and they could do so many cool things with him. And Carl Lumbly, particularly in this movie, he's really good. I liked him a lot. In the scenes, any scene that he was in, I was like, yeah, okay, what are we doing here? And then so much other stuff is happening over here that you can't focus on the thing that's happening here. And I remember having kind of the same, I think, critique for Falcon and the Winter Soldier, where it's like, y'all brought the Isaiah Bradley stuff? Okay, cool. That's interesting to me, because in the conversation of having a black Captain America, let's talk about this guy who literally was Black Captain America. Let's have a conversation about that. And in speaking about this character, Marvel has this issue, and I don't know. Yeah, I don't know what's good or wrong or what they can or can't do about. Marvel has this issue where they cannot make any kind of racial political statements. They just can't, like, they just act like they can't.
They're apolitical.
Go that. Yeah,
completely
they're apolitical. They can't go the extra mile to have a conversation about why Isaiah Bradley as this old black Captain America, him getting in trouble, Sam Wilson, why some people don't trust him, that microaggression against Sam Wilson when the president first gets attacked, you know what I'm saying? There's just like things that I wish they could just be loud about, that it has to be subtle, and if it's not subtle, then it's the wrong thing. They're afraid to be, I know what it is. They're afraid to be called woke and all this other stuff. Like they don't, there's these things that they've done in the past that have been called woke, and they shouldn't have done that now they're afraid for that to happen. They do not want that to happen again. I remember when the girls part of Endgame, when all the women kind of team up in Endgame, they got a lot of shit for that moment, and it's almost like they don't want to.
Rightfully so. They got
no. I'm not saying that's not rightfully so. But I'm saying there's just been so many moments of stuff like that has happened that they're like, okay, we have to stay away from all of that stuff completely. We don't want to get taught. We don't want to be called woke. We don't want to be called none of these other things. So it's weird because it's like, on one hand, you have to talk about the clear elephant in the room, and the whole point of this thing is blackness and Captain America and all of that stuff and what that means. And on the other hand, it's like, well, we don't want to be called woke though, so we have to kind of keep this thing under wraps and not have to make a political statement about this whole thing. I understand the dilemma they're in, but it's annoying, and I wish they weren't in a dilemma. Just make a statement, stop holding back, and actually care about this thing. Because in a lot of ways, Isaiah Bradley should have been in the movie. To me, I feel like they could have done some really cool stuff over there with that, and that's personal to Anthony Mackie, Sam Wilson. That's personal. That's the stuff where I'm like, okay, cool. Old black Captain America, new black Captain America. Let's talk about it. And it's like, we can't.
I don't know. I have really complicated feelings on this. It's a very complicated position for them to be in. A lot of it is their own making. Stuff like that within Endgame, stuff like other things that they've done that appear to be disingenuous and appear to pander to certain demographics, that has put them in a position in which they now have to be overly conscious about these things that they do now, because that woke shit, the culture war, these are real things. There's real backlash that has happened because of all of that stuff, and I think rightfully so. Me personally, I don't think anybody should be making a movie, especially at this level. Now, if you want to make an indie movie, that's a different thing. But at this level, I don't think any agenda should be coming before just telling a good story. Bottom line, that's how I feel. Don't put your fucking bullshit agenda. Let me not call it bullshit. Let me take that back. But don't put your agenda before telling just a good, solid story, especially for characters and a universe that is supposed to have such mass appeal. Like, that's the reality of it. Like, this stuff is meant to be consumed by a lot of people, in particular children and people of young ages. Like, this isn't just meant for like one individual and all of that stuff. And there's always going to be takes and different interpretations and things that we can probably touch on. But at the end of the day, when you're coming into such a factory, such a machine of this size, to be putting all of these different agendas before just telling a good quality, entertaining story, I think that's going to be a mistake. That's going to lead you down a pretty dark path, and people are going to revolt and backlash and show like, we don't want that shit. We're pissed off by it. And they went on this streak after Endgame. It all kind of kicked off with that fucking, girl power moment in Endgame, but they went on this streak of probably moving a little too quickly on, hey guys, look at this hero, look at this character that's diverse and that's qualifying and checking all these boxes, and it felt like box checking for a long time. It didn't feel like it was genuine and necessary to what they were actually trying to further within the universe. It just felt like they were trying to check boxes. And I feel that way about, we just talked about it, the new show, Your Friendly Neighborhood Spider-Man. I feel like it's a lot of box checking that they're doing. And in this movie, when you decide to have like an Isaiah Bradley character based off what they did in Falcon and the Winter Soldier, when you don't unpack the stuff that we had already introduced in that story, that's a disconnect right there. Because there were things that they opened up, but they don't really explore, they don't really let fester, and they don't revisit here at all. So that's already a mistake, number one. But then conversely, if you start to lean into that stuff heavily into this movie, especially for those people that didn't see the Falcon and the Winter Soldier, they're gonna be like, what the fuck? Why is this movie about this character that I don't know about, that has all of these racial implications and all of this different stuff? Like, then there's going to be backlash for that. So I don't know what technically the right answer is. It's a very, very fine line to walk. What I will say is that this is a monster of their own making. I think that this is
Yeah.
it's a lot of their own responsibility that they have to shoulder this, and now they have to tiptoe around a lot of this stuff, as opposed to just trying to tell a good story. And if you
Mm-hmm.
tell a good story, and if it comes from a genuine, authentic place, I think all of that stuff can organically follow. I think all of that stuff can naturally be a part of the movie and can come out in the story, and we can do it in ways that are very intelligent, but also don't make it seem like you're just trying to shoehorn a fucking message in and being
Exactly.
preached to. I kind of feel like Black Panther was maybe the best example of doing that. Like, you can enjoy that movie on two different levels, as pure
Mm-hmm.
spectacle entertainment, and also as something a little bit deeper that resonates with a certain type of person, with a certain type of experience. All those different things can come out as well.
Yeah.
They're not doing that though. They're not cracking that formula at this particular point. And Isaiah Bradley, he's a pawn essentially in this film. There's even a moment, later on when Sam realizes what's going on and he has a conversation with President Ross. It's in the submarine ship before they have the fight on Celestial Island. He's trying to explain to Thunderbolt Ross like what's going on here, and he's like, "It's mind control." And I'm like, that's a real line in the script. It's mind control. Like, it's just that basic. It's just that out there. It's really badly written, and unfortunately it's badly delivered. Mind control in and of itself is fine, but I think we could have found probably a better way to say that and execute that. And so yeah, unfortunately he just becomes a pawn. Now, Carl Lumbly, his performance was pretty solid. I liked what he did there on that standpoint, but the character, yeah, definitely somewhat of an afterthought here, as opposed to like a driving force. Speaking of afterthoughts, Tim Blake Nelson, Samuel Stearns, the leader, another character from the Incredible Hulk, primary villain of this film. Now properly the leader. We get to see how he looks in this movie as the leader. Big brain, sort of, a really deformed appearance. And I'm a little confused about his motivations in this movie, to be honest. I like, on one hand, he wants retribution against Ross for what Ross did to him. And Ross has essentially held him in captivity for a very long time. He's been operating in the shadows in this layer, this off the grid layer, doing certain things for Ross. But he's also been helping keep Ross in check and keep him alive with these pills that have prevented him from turning into Red Hulk this entire time. Although they never unpacked when that happened, how he all of a sudden, got the gamma radiation, when the first transformation might have happened. How do we even know? Does Ross even know that he can become Red Hulk? Like, do we even really know, like, when that's a thing? Like, when he becomes consciously aware that he can become Red Hulk? Did that happen before this movie? Does it happen in this movie? Like, is when he become Red Hulk in the third act of this movie, is that the first time that's ever happened? I assume so. But did he know that was even capable? Like, we don't unpack any of that stuff. And Samuel Stearns, like, he's just kind of the guy pulling the strings and orchestrating a plot, but a plot that ultimately fails. And he's supposed to be extremely intelligent, but he gets outsmarted a couple of times throughout this movie, which left me confused. Like, wait a second. You aren't that cunning. You aren't that smart. You're not Zemo. You haven't proven to be like that much of a formidable force from an intellectual standpoint. So how much of a threat are you really? Because he ultimately got locked away by the end. So I don't know. What do you think about, like, the use of Samuel Stearns and the leader and him coming back in this film?
Yeah, he lost because he didn't know that Sam Wilson was a counselor. That's why he lost. He didn't calculate.
That's crazy. Because you're right. That's exactly what they fucking said in that movie.
He didn't calculate that Captain America was personable and could talk to the Red Hulk. That's why he lost this whole thing.
Guys, this is really happening.
Oh man. Tim Blake Nelson, man, what a good actor. But wow, Samuel Stearns. So there's, I don't even know where to start with this dude. Seeing him in his design, I'll start there. It was cool. I like seeing his little head and how creepy he was. I think he fit the creepy factor really well. I was like, oh man, that's a good old fashioned villain. I was like, I like the way you look. You're not normal. He's a normal deformed villain. So I thought that stuff was cool. But there's a lot of stuff, particularly in the moment where Sam and Joaquin go to the base in which he operates, that there's just so many weird plot holes there, where like the guards, where did all of them come from? Because there was 2 guards when they first got there, and this, like, I don't know, just a lot of weird stuff I think happening in those moments. And it's because a lot of that stuff surrounds Tim Blake or Samuel Stearns and his character, I'm like, what is going on here? I like the concept of him being able to do all these calculations. I don't mind that stuff. You're the leader, of course. You're supposed to be the super smart guy, but it's almost like he can do what Doctor Strange can do without the magic part, right? Like he's just so smart. He's like Reed Richards. Like he could theorize and calculate and come to these conclusions. Like, and I agree with you though. It's like, wow, you're so smart that you kind of lost in this way. Like part of me wishes he, honestly, I don't even know. Just not like that. Just don't lose because Captain America can speak well to
we
other
don't
people.
see his intelligence at all.
Yeah,
they never do anything to show us that this guy is 3 steps ahead, that he's cunning. Like there's none of that stuff in here. Like the only one up that he had against Sam was the fact that he was able to take out the guy who was going to get more information about the pills. Like that was the only time where it's like, oh yeah, he's 1 step ahead of Sam. But like you said, they undo that moments later when Sam is like, oh, you didn't account for the fact that I'm a counselor. Like that's the reason that you aren't going to win. Like that's dumb shit. That's just dumb.
Yeah, and he didn't even in part of his big thing was trying to unleash the Red Hulk. Part of me, when they're in the naval or hit into the celestial island and the whole naval thing is happening, I wanted an Avengers moment
where then, for sure.
I wanted an Avengers moment where instead of the helicarrier, you got Red Hulk, Thaddeus Ross on this boat in the middle of a war. That's interesting. That's like, in Japan is like, what the hell is this Red Hulk? What is this? That's interesting to me. And they didn't go that far. They had to wait until the end of the movie, into the final act, to bring out the Red Hulk. But that was, to me, that was the moment. I'm like, yeah, no, do it right now. Because it's the craziest time and craziest opportunity in order to get it done. But yeah, man, I like the concept of Samuel Stearns / the leader, kind of. I like the things that he might be able to do, but again, just like a lot of other parts of this movie, just really bad execution, man. They just didn't. He honestly, I don't even know if he had to be. I don't know, man. I don't even know what else to say. It's just they could have done better with what's happening here.
It was a waste. It was just a waste. It's another bad villain in the MCU. Historically, they've had issues with this. You know, we can count the great villains on probably one, maybe now 2 hands, but it's not the overwhelming majority. This is just another entry into the bad villain canon of the MCU. He doesn't have a lot to do. His motivations are thin. We don't even. Again, another character we don't even have like a real relationship with because he hasn't been around for 17 years. We haven't seen any of the plight that he's dealt with. We've not seen him struggle. It's just all like, just tell us. You're just telling us. This is adding on to the whole idea that there's just like nothing but exposition in the script. They're just telling us everything. There's no showing of anything. At least with like a character with Zemo in Civil War. With Zemo, they could show it. First of all, we saw Avengers Age of Ultron, so we saw the destruction of what happened in Sokovia. You understood, like, damn, there probably were a lot of people that died off screen that we don't even know about. Like, what's the collateral damage here? So when that's Zemo's primary motivation in Civil War, we can already lock in and connect with that. And then Zemo as a character and what Daniel Bruhl is able to do in such a great way is to convey the emotional weight of what it was like. He had the voicemail from his wife, the only remaining message from her that he can listen to over and over to hear her voice. That's a very, very easy thing to identify with and say, like, yeah, he's pissed off. He's going to do whatever he can to break up the Avengers. They don't add none of that complexity, none of those layers to Samuel Stearns. Like, again, another character I don't care about. You've been in the lab for 17 years doing what? Who gives a fuck? Go back down there. Stay down there. Keep working, my guy. Like, I don't care. I don't care that you're deformed. I don't care what happened to your appearance, which doesn't look all that great. It's a B at best, but the appearance itself is like fine. But all of this stuff is, again, just lost on all of them trying to do so many different things within the script and within the story, and it just doesn't add up into anything that's satisfying or feels wholly thought out. It all feels like fragmented pieces of multiple different stories that never coalesces into something greater. And that's the problem, I think, with this character. That continues on with Giancarlo Esposito, who comes in and plays another side character, Sidewinder. Now, this is what's interesting, and I want to unpack this conversation here because there have been a lot of talks and a lot of speculation, online chatter. We've talked about it several times. If you've been locked in with this stuff, you know exactly where I'm going to go with this, but about the apparent multiple rounds of reshoots with this movie. There were reports for years that this movie went through multiple rounds of reshoots. Now, Julius Ona, the director, has come out And on the Phase Hero podcast with Brandon Davis, he said that they only had one round of reshoots, dispelling that myth. He said it was 22 days, which is pretty lengthy. That's a pretty lengthy amount of time. That's like 3 weeks of reshoots that we're doing. But he said it was only one. There will be reports out there that would, be on the contrary. But be that as it may, there was a round of reshoots. Marvel does factor this into all of their productions. That is not uncommon. But I guess we just don't know the degree in which these reshoots impacted this story. That's been a large part of the conversation. Apparently, there was a test screening that happened a few years ago that was not well received, that did not go well, that necessitated this 22-day reshoot. And in the 11th hour, they added this new villain, Sidewinder, played by Giancarlo Esposito. And there was even a report from Voelker that came out, I think the day the film was released or just the past couple of days, and somebody, a part of the production, spoke out. They spoke out anonymously, but they spoke out about their experience on set. I have a quick quote I just want to read. This person, who remained anonymous, said this, quote, "I worked on the reshoots. I think everyone on the crew knew that this is probably not going to be a good film. Some of the action sequences were not believable. We had a lot of frustrations on set. After principal photography was finished, it was like, oh, we're going to introduce the leader of the Serpent Society. It was on, then it was off, then it was on again. That's very expensive to do. My coworkers who spent more time on Brave New World than I did said, yeah, this has been a really rough production," end quote. I think that little thing encapsulates the character of Sidewinder in this movie, because there's nothing more shoehorned into this film than that character. So what do you want to say about Giancarlo Esposito here, the character of Sidewinder, and just ultimately the impact that he had on the story?
Wow. Why? Why did they feel like they had to add Giancarlo Esposito as Sidewinder in this movie? It's just one of those things. I really have to I don't understand it. And he has to be the crux of what these reshoots were. You can tell when you watch it. You can tell the little scene the car scene that you see with him, and he kind of blows up Sam's car. Is like, yeah, this is all a reshoot. You could feel it. And speaking about believable, there's just a moment where the cops pull up and he turns around and just starts. I'm like, none of this makes sense. First of all, what kind of cop car is going to turn into that like that? That was crazy. I was like, is this nigga in Fast and Furious? This is the craziest cop I've ever seen. Turning into a dude with a gun is nuts. With your window facing him, the dude with the AK in his head. And I was like, whoa, y'all
go back to cop school real quick.
Let's go back to cop school.
That's the first thing you should not do.
Some of the worst tactics I've ever seen. That's insane. But man, it's just I just don't get it. I think part of it's just frustrating, because it's you have Giancarlo Esposito, one of the best on-screen villains we've ever seen. Easy. One of the best villains we've ever seen. Anytime he plays a villain, I'm like, hell yeah, let's do it. I know it's going to be good. I know it's going to be believable. And he has nothing to do. At least a lot of those other villains that he plays that we love, they're interesting. They have something about them that we're like, oh my God, this dude is kind of crazy, or I understand his motivations, or I get this thing. Sidewinder is just here, and in a lot of ways similar to we were just talking about Isaiah Bradley being a pawn. This dude is a pawn for the movie. It's like, why do you even have to be here almost at all? Shoehorned, you said it was the best way kind of to put it, because it felt hella forced. And they also kind of do this thing where you can tell they might want to bring him back. So they do the little plea deal or whatever last minute, oh, you might see him later. But part of me is just like, why not just bring him in later then, if that's what the point of this was? Why? This movie's convoluted enough. We already got Thaddeus Ross, Isaiah Bradley, and Sam Wilson got to deal with his own stuff. There's Celestials in the ocean, and now we're throwing in Giancarlo Esposito with Sidewinder. It's just I don't understand. I just don't get it. I don't get it.
What a waste. What a fucking waste of talent, of time, and of resources. The great Giancarlo Esposito. I've been following him for a long time. Bugging Out, Dean Big Brother Almighty. Gus Fring, he's been that guy for 40 years, just a really, really well-respected character actor, has had an incredible career, and has had this new resurgence because of what he did on Breaking Bad and Better Call Saul as Gus Fring. He's become more of a notable face. And, because of that, because of his incredible work on that show, just the the details and the finely drawn character that he brought to life in those shows, Breaking Bad and Better Call Saul, he's been typecast as villains a lot lately. And the unfortunate drawback of that is that you start to just play variations of the villain you already perfected. Gus Fring is a perfect character.
Perfect.
Everything that he's done since then has just kind of been a variation of Gus Fring, and it's always going to be lesser than. And studios and casting directors are going to bring him in because he knows how to do that really well. And sometimes, occasionally, it might work. It might be okay. This is the way to not do it because the character has no influence on the story at all. It's a complete waste and usage of the character of Sidewinder, who could be cool in a story. He could operate in that sort of crossbones territory that we saw in Winter Soldier and Civil War, but they don't even get to that level. And then the pure waste of talent from Giancarlo Esposito, who's been fan cast for years now in many different roles. He's been fan cast as Magneto and Norman Osborn. We know that he can do more. We know that he can be at the forefront of a very, very prominent character. So when you hear that he's going to be Sidewinder, I'm already like, this is what we're going to give him after all these years. Like this is the character that we're gonna saddle him with and make him be associated with in the MCU. Now with some great filmmaking, some great writing, he can become super interesting. He can become a prominent force. He can become as big of a villain as the next guy. Yeah. This ain't a great start though. This is definitely not a good fucking start. And all of this stuff is clearly based on the reshoots. Like he's interacting with no other character except Sam Wilson. He doesn't talk to a single other soul in this movie except Anthony Mackie. So clearly you're already like, well, that's a little odd. He's not interacting with anybody else. We don't truly see the Serpent Society in this movie. He's supposed to be the leader of that team. We don't see any other team member. We just see a bunch of like random disposable bodies like no name faces. There was at one point that Seth Rollins, the WWE superstar, was supposed to be in this movie. This was prior to Giancarlo Esposito. I guess they were just going to do a larger Serpent Society that was going to be leaderless, or maybe they were going to reserve and save Sidewinder for later, and perhaps they did a swap. I don't know what the better way to go about it was. I just know that what they gave us, it just wasn't it. This just was not it. And it's clearly a detriment to the movie. It's clearly like one of those aspects that comes into the film, that action sequence when they go to revisit him later in the prison, that offsite prison. That's just a weird sequence. It's just like, this is just off. Like, I just don't understand. Like, none of this feels like it's going anywhere. None of it feels like it's moving anything significantly forward. We're just getting more exposition, finding out information. It's on to the next thing. That's all it is. And it just serves as a purpose to, I guess, have him as a placeholder for potentially a future appearance. But this ain't what I want to see Giancarlo Esposito doing. I want to see him doing something else, something much more interesting and cool. This just ain't cool. That's really what it boils down to. He got his ass whooped. Let's move on. Danny Ramirez, Joaquin Torres is Falcon. We did see him in Falcon and the Winter Soldier. They established that relationship early on. Has a little to do here, not a ton, but he is, sort of the sidekick, sort of a Robin-esque character to the Batman, character coming into his own, taking on the identity of Falcon, following behind Sam. Within that role and being sort of an accompanying member on all of these missions that they go on. So what do you want to say about Danny Ramirez, what he did with the character, the suit, the look, just all the story beats, the interaction, the chemistry with him and Sam Wilson? How did you feel about what they did with Falcon here?
Man, new Falcon, Joaquin Torres. He's fine. He's okay. I know a lot of people I was seeing found him to be, I think, annoying in the movie, but he was just okay to me. He was just the quippy guy, and I think we've gotten that a lot before. Like somebody's always trying to tell jokes. He did get a little bit annoying with the old jokes with Isaiah Bradley in particular. I was like, all right, you know what this man can do. Calm down. It's okay, but I think overall he's fine. I think I hate that they felt like they had to use him as like this thing to help fuel as like an incubator for Sam Wilson. Like it's like the sidekick had to get hurt in order for the hero to then think about what's going on and to sit with his thoughts and what's happening. I hate that they felt like they had to do that. I wish they could have, if they wanted to sideline him in the story in that particular moment in a for some reason, I wish they did it in another way. I didn't feel like they had to go that far. But they did, and so I didn't like that aspect of it. But in terms of him as a character, Danny Ramirez playing the character, I think he's fine. I think he feels cool. He kind of feels like the same way when I first seen Falcon kind of pull up. I was just like, oh, okay, cool, Falcon's here. And that's kind of it. You know what I'm saying? Like, that's kind of it. It's like, okay, maybe later on down the line he'll do something, but for now, he just kind of fills space as the sidekick. He really does. He doesn't have too much to do. He's just kind of here to look up to the hero. And you know, and I think he is the character that they're trying to use us to get us to think that Sam Wilson can be Captain America. It's like, look, he's leading this guy. Look, everybody, he's leading this guy. And I think that's fine, but he's just one person, similar to how I feel about Sam Wilson still just being like wings in the sky, a guy that can go do this thing. Joaquin Torres still fits the same bill. He just feels like the other guy that can also be in the sky now. He doesn't necessarily feel like somebody who's super important yet. And so yeah, man, he's okay. That's all I can really say about him.
So I don't know. When I first saw Falcon, Sam Wilson in the MCU, I thought that was one of the best introductions of a new character that they had, because the first moment you see Sam Wilson is him jogging in the morning on the Capitol, and you see Steve Rogers on your left, running extremely faster. And then they have that conversation with each other at the park, and they talk to each other. You find out a lot about Sam in that moment, where he comes from, his military background, the fact that he is a counselor. You find out Steve and just sort of the out of touch nature of who he is right now, but just the fact that he's also like supremely advanced in his combat abilities because he has the serum. And then they do that exchange of the lists, and Sam tells him, like, listen to Marvin Gaye, go listen to Trouble Man, that'll catch you up on everything. Here's a list of what you need to do. They do so much with so little in that amount of time. Within the first 5 minutes of Winter Soldier, we don't get anything like that with Joaquin Torres in any of these stories. Not within the Falcon and the Winter Soldier, and not within this movie. Like there's not that moment until the end of the movie. They wait until the end after he's hurt to give us all this information. It's like, guys, give us that in the beginning so that I can fall in love with the character throughout the course of the movie. Don't just make him a quip machine who's going to say random jokes every 5 minutes to get me to relate to him and buy into him. That doesn't work. Give me a legitimate reason to understand like why that this is important for him. Even if it's not a ton of time, but we find out at the end of the movie, I wanted to get out of Miami. I want it to be just like you, Sam. I want it to be the Falcon, which is also bullshit. Nobody grows up wanting to be Falcon. Let's just be real about that.
That's not a thing.
No, you want it to be Cap, but you're being nice. But anyway, still, if you're going to say that, say that. I want us to get out of Miami. I want it to aspire to something greater. I want it to be Falcon. Give us that stuff in the beginning. Give us a reason to buy into him as a character and to relate to him. They don't do that until he's hurt on a hospital bed at the end of the film. It's too little too late at that point. Whereas with Sam, when we first saw him, we learned so much about him in a very, very quick and short amount of time. And that's just, we've done this, guys. 35 movies. We have done this. Like, why are we forgetting the very things that brought us to the dance to begin with? I just don't understand that type of stuff. Danny Ramirez, he's fine in the role. I like him. I actually do like him as an actor. He's also going to be in The Last of Us this upcoming season. I've seen the first 4 episodes of the new season. He's a bad guy, so he's playing something a little bit different. He's good as an actor. So I want to see more out of him. But again, just like what they're giving him here, it's not enough. It's just not enough stuff. It's not enough when you're just making old jokes about Isaiah. You're randomly saying punk ass. Like, none of that stuff is working, my guy. Like, we need more. We need better writing, better presentation, better reasons to just give a fuck. That's really what it boils down to. So I want to see more out of him, but they just didn't do a ton here for the new Falcon. And then the last big character we should talk about is Shira Haas, who plays Ruth Bat-Seraph, who works on behalf of President Ross in the movie. Now, I just want to preface this and say there's a lot of controversy around the inclusion of this character, the Israeli connections, all of that stuff. I'm not well equipped to talk about a lot of that stuff. I know that there's a lot of protesting happening, a lot of the Palestine stuff as it relates to this character, because this is like an actual comic character. Sabra is an Israeli superhero that they've decided to introduce in this movie. There's a lot of stuff with that, but I'm going to strictly personally, I'm just going to talk about the character in and of itself in the movie, and just like how they utilized her and just her function within the story. And again, she's working on behalf of Ross. She's kind of leading the investigation behind the whole mind control plot, after Isaiah tries to take out the president. And then ultimately she does work side by side with Sam and Danny throughout the course of the story, kind of doing her own thing for most of it, but we do see her occasionally pop up as a physical threat, I suppose, but then also as somebody who is doing some investigative work to try to uncover the plot here and what's happening. But yeah, what do you want to say about Shira Haas and just her performance and just the character and how they were used in the course of the story?
Man, what to say about her? She is just also another character that feels like they just kind of got thrown in to the movie. They it almost feels like they needed some way to give, I guess, I feel like they needed a female presence in the movie. And they decided on this character. I feel like this is the character they came up with. They needed a girl. This is the character they came up with. This is the one they picked. And she happens to be a widow. She happens to work for Thaddeus Ross. And that's really it. Like the only interesting thing about her to me, at least, is the fact that she's an ex-widow. But I'm curious, like, how did that happen? How did you even get here? How are you even in this role? Like, how do you go from being a Black Widow to the head security detail of the president of the United States? I think that's an interesting idea to explore. But again, they just throw her in here and all of that stuff never gets explored. So she's just another character that can do flips. Not only that, but on the believable side of things, she is very tiny.
She's 5 feet tall, basically.
Very tiny. Very tiny. Like, you can be a widow. I get that part. Like, you can still, I'm sure you can be 5 foot and still be a widow. I'm sure that's the thing. Florence Pugh ain't that tall either. I get it. But the things that she does, it's just like, nah, bro.
Stop it.
Like, I don't,
yeah,
what
stop,
do we?
Just stop it. Yeah, it's not.
No. When we see Scarlett Johansson has good size. Scarlett Johansson is a good size. She looks like a Black, like, she's Black Widow. It feels like the things she's doing, she could do. Shira Haas here, it doesn't click for me. I'm sorry, it didn't make any sense. And part of me doesn't mind the idea of like a small badass. We see that all the time, but make the situations make sense and make the situations believable. I don't think they did that here. But yeah, man, it just felt like this is they needed a girl. This is the only girl character really in the whole movie besides that is Ross's daughter. It feels like they needed a female character in the movie. We got all these Black Widows out here now. Let's throw her in here. There we go. That's her character. Let's make her do some stuff. And yeah, that's it. That she didn't have much of anything to do but kind of be a talking piece.
Yeah, just more exposition laden script screenwriting for her character. She's just nothing but a plot device to move things forward, to explain things, to provide, I guess, some semblance of clarity. And then a couple of times we see some hand-to-hand combat out of her, which, come on. I mean, no. I don't care if you're a Black Widow. Like, you are whooping ass on 6 foot, 6'2", 6'4" military soldiers with weapons in their hands. Somebody shoot this little fucking person. Like, shoot them dead. Like, we're not, like, what are we talking about? She should not be whooping ass on that level. There is not a believability in relation to her. I'm sorry. Like, if she did have a bigger size, was more presentable in that way, sure, I can get there. But she is just so small.
She's very small.
And I don't have I'm a small guy myself. Like, I don't have a prejudice, but we have to like, let's be realistic, guys. Like, let's really think about this. Like, okay, what actor can we put in this position to actually have audiences say, like, yes, there's verisimilitude in their presentation. Like, I understand that they could actually whoop some ass and handle themselves and take on multiple people at one time. And Shira Haas just doesn't fit that bill in that description. She develops, I guess, like a little quick it's not a crush, but she has a little eye for Bucky in this movie. We should point out this quick cameo that we got. This was the one thing that we didn't 100% know. This was I would say a surprise in the movie. We do see Sebastian Stan pop up in this film as Bucky. It's after Danny Ramirez, Joaquin Torres has been shot out of the sky. He's on the operating table, and Bucky pops up. And we learned a little bit about Bucky. Apparently, he's running for a seat at Congress. He's attempting to become a congressman. Even notwithstanding his very, very checkered history, his very questionable past, he's running for an official government seat. But he shows up to have a heart-to-heart with Sam, to remind him of who he is, to remind him of the type of person that he is, and just to remind us as an audience, like, these two have a very strong connection with each other, obviously in light of Steve Rogers, but also just the natural connection that they developed with each other. So, when Sam is at his lowest point in this movie, Bucky is kind of there to pick him up and to just remind him, like, you got this, you are capable. This is the type of hero that you are. This is why people aspire to be like you, as opposed to the type of hero that Steve Rogers was. So how did you feel about seeing Sebastian Stan here, seeing Bucky come back and be a part of the story?
I was happy to see him in the movie. I think, I really wasn't sure if we would see him. I'm glad that we seen him. And he does come in somewhat Sam Wilson's lowest moment, which makes sense. It's like, okay, all of that stuff makes sense. And I think it was interesting to hear that he was going to be a congressman for the reason that you just said. Because what? This guy is like, I understand now he's reformed, he has a new heart and all of these things, but electing somebody as congressman, even running to be in Congress for somebody that has killed as many people as he killed. Now he killed like the sweetheart of the nation in Mr. Stark and in Tony Stark's father. It's just like
He's killed government officials.
these government officials. I mean, he is man.
He killed the king of Wakanda. Let's not forget that. He's responsible for the death of the king of Wakanda. That happened.
Oh my God. This guy, ooh-wee. Like, there's a reason he was White Wolf. You know what I'm saying? There's a reason he's in like the depths hiding in Wakanda all this time. And all of a sudden you're running. I just don't feel like you can go from hiding in Wakanda with your sash on, probably no pants on, to like running for Congress. It's just the craziest thing to me. Like, you were hiding out from the world for the things that you have done. Now you're, I don't know, man. That's just really crazy. But what does make that interesting is bringing that plot line potentially into Thunderbolts could be interesting. Like, oh man, you're running for Congress. Now you gotta step out of your own shoes and have to go return to the Winter Soldier. I think that's an interesting idea. If they actually do something with it. So we'll have to see. But yeah, long story short, I was happy to see Bucky. I thought it made sense for the story, and I thought it was cool.
It makes the new Thunderbolts trailer even make more sense because he's the one sitting at that government hearing with Valentina. So it's likely because he's going to try to go after a government seat. This is what I'll say. This was my favorite part of the movie by far. Seeing Bucky show up and talk to Sam in that small, quiet moment was my favorite part of this entire film because for just a split second, it reminded me of the old MCU. It reminded me of where we had been. It reminded me of a relationship that's been through things, that's been well developed, that's been well written, that has motivation and history and backstory that's just been fleshed out. These guys have been attached at the hip for years now. Like, we first saw them really interacting with each other in Winter Soldier. They were at odds with each other. Civil War. They're kind of fighting and being jealous over Steve and their relationship with him. Really funny stuff. They're working alongside each other in Infinity War, again in Endgame, the whole series. All of that legwork that led us to this moment. When you see him come on, I got kind of choked up. I'm like, yes, this is the person that Sam needs to hear from the most at this particular moment. Like, nobody knows him better in this current situation than Bucky. And so I love seeing Bucky here, and I love seeing Sebastian Stan pop up for this moment. It just reminded me of the things that they can do well in the MCU when you have the good characters and the good writing all fueling the story and moving things progressively forward. The whole congressman stuff, we're gonna have to unpack that in Thunderbolts. Like, I'm with you. We gotta address that.
Talk about it.
There's a lot going on there. We gotta talk about it. I mean, we can look at the real world, and people have been elected for some pretty heinous stuff, but he got a long criminal record of bodies. Yeah, he got proven bodies on his record.
This is crazy.
Yeah, this is definitely a whole nother level. He got proven bodies attached to his record. I know the president pardoned him, but goddamn. So I can't wait to hopefully unpack that conversation in Thunderbolts. But it was really, really a treat to see Sebastian Stan here. But speaking of characters popping up or not popping up, another concern I had with the movie, and it's just my own thinking, just remembering where we came from, Falcon and the Winter Soldier, to now, where was Sharon Carter? Why wasn't she in this movie? Like, the whole, what was the character? Not the stockbroker, the power broker?
Power broker.
Power broker. That was like a big cliffhanger to find out that she was the power broker at the end of the Falcon and the Winter Soldier. And she's nowhere to be found. She's not a part of the story at all. Like, what was the point of that end credit scene? This is kind of like another conversation about end credits and loose threads. Like, this is a movie that's filled with nothing but tying up loose ends. It ties up loose ends from the Incredible Hulk and Eternals and all of these different things, but it failed to tie up one of its own loose ends with the previous story. And Sharon Carter, like, what is she doing? Is that ever going to be paid off? We have, like, I don't know, 14. There's actually a Variety article out there right now that says that there are 14 post-credit scenes in the MCU that have yet to be tied up, that have all come from phases 4 and 5 moving into 6. Like, all these post-credit scenes that we've seen over the years, 14 of them have not had payoffs yet. It's been years, and she's a part of that list. So I don't know if you thought about her at all. Maybe not. I think a lot of people have probably forgotten about her because she hasn't been around.
No, I actually did think about her. I was like, what happened to Sharon here? Especially just seeing. Actually, I thought about it when Bucky popped up. I was like, wait, where's Sharon at? Because I thought about all the Madripoor stuff, and like I was just thinking, why isn't that stuff important anymore. What happened, I think, to the, because like you said in post credit scene, or the kind of the ending of Falcon and Winter Soldier, they made it seem like the things that she was going after and doing was so important. Like, we were going to talk about all that stuff. She was going to be a big player in the things that are coming up, and it feels like this movie would have been the time. And now I even get more confused because in a film where we got Shira Haas as Ruth, it's being so important, and we're looking for our female character. Hello, like, she's right there. And yeah, I honestly don't know what where she is or what they're doing with her. But yeah, I definitely did think about her. I was very confused a little bit by her absence. Yeah, but I don't, maybe she'll be important in Thunderbolts. Who knows?
I wouldn't even hold out hope at that point. Let's start to enter into the home stretch here and wrap up. We've already talked about the final big action set piece. And ultimately Ross, he's thrown into the raft. He can no longer be president. A Hulk can't be president at this point. He does reunite with his daughter. We do see Liv Tyler pop up and sort of reunite and reestablish that relationship. And then we end off with Sam and Joaquin in the hospital, sort of talking to each other and preparing, I guess, for what's next. We do get a post-credit stinger with Tim Blake Nelson, who's also in the raft. Sam goes to visit him. I would say that this is one of the worst post-credit scenes in MCU history. It is such fucking nothing. It's the most nothing post-credit scene. I can deal with waiting for 10 minutes and getting something funny. I can deal with waiting for something cheeky and cute. Like, everything doesn't have to lead to the next thing. And we've seen how they've, tripped over their own feet trying to set up new shit, with all these unpaid off post-credit stingers. But this one, it's baffling because you get the leader alluding to something very non-specific. He just says, like, I've done the calculations. You think you're the only hero? You think you're the only world? You think that there aren't others out there? It's just so non-specific. And honestly, it can apply to either Kang or Doom. Like, it doesn't address anything that's coming down the pipeline. And I was just like, what the fuck? In the theater, there was a collective groan when it was over. Everybody was like, yo, what? What was that? Like, everybody was pissed off. I've never felt a more ice cold reaction to a post-credit scene. Yeah, what do you think? What do you think about this setup for what's going to come next in Phase 6?
I guess I will say, at least it's a post-credit scene we know will pay off.
Do we know that? Do we know that?
Doomsday's happening, so like,
this shit could have been. This shit could have been a Kang reference, man. This shit, they might have filmed this 2 years ago and didn't change it, because I'm like, bro, you didn't say anything that we didn't already know.
Yeah, no, it was definitely I couldn't believe I waited there all that time for that. I was like, oh, this is what we're waiting for. But yeah, man, I have no idea what's happening or why they did that. I think it's gonna go down as probably the worst post-credit scene we've seen. Like, I can't think of any other one. I was like, oof, I don't know about that one. At least, like you said, at least at the end of them, there's always something to laugh about. Or even if they left open a loose end, at least the loose end was interesting, right? Like, Hercules was interesting. Like, at least it was like, oh, that's pretty cool. You know what I'm saying? We might not ever talk about it ever again, but at least we were like, oh, that's pretty cool. And this was not it. But yeah, man, I don't really have much to add. It was that disappointing. I was pretty sad by it.
Oh man, what a waste. They could have at least put it in the mid credits so that going into
everybody gotta wait.
Yeah, It's just one, guys. You see the credits, boom, you can leave if you choose to after. But no, they made us wait the entire credit sequence to see this nothingness. As we conclude here, I want to have a bit of a bigger picture conversation because I'm concerned. So we'll do that to wrap up. But before we do that, rankings, MCU. Where would this fall for you? 35 films. This list is becoming very unwieldy at this point. I think it's becoming increasingly difficult to rank these things against each other as we get further along. But where would this rank amongst the 35 theatrically released MCU movies that we've gotten so far?
As of right now, I have it in the 29 out of 35 films. It is sitting kind of wrapped around Marvels and Quantumania. It's funny. This is like all together. These all just belong kind of together. But Yeah, man, that's kind of where it falls right now. It has just one of those rankings that could fall, it could rise. It doesn't matter. That, to be honest, anything like 28 to 35 kind of have the same ranking in my head. Like they all just are grouped in a, I guess, kind of category. Like if you say so, MCU kind of
A
category.
slop pile.
A slot pile
Here's the
of like,
slop
let's
shit.
just throw that over there. You say what you want about these movies. I won't be offended. But yeah, that's kind of where it exists right now.
There's 35 films, 33 for me. Again, I just think this movie sucks. I think it's bad. It's mildly better than Quantumania. Quantumania is at the bottom. The Incredible Hulk is at the bottom because it's just like largely forgotten about until now, ironically. And yeah, it's hovering around like all of those lesser movies that I just don't really care as much about. Captain Marvel, the first one, Ant-Man and the Wasp. Not a really huge fan of that second movie. Love and Thunder has taken a real hit for me over the years. It just continues to drop.
It keeps going down.
It just keeps going down. It's just like that shit is not aging well whatsoever. But this is bad outright for me. Bad out of the gate. I don't like a ton about this movie. Instantly walking out of it, I was like, this is just really, really bottom tier for what they've put out. So currently 33 out of 35 for me. That's how I feel about it. But you know, in thinking about that, this is the second to last movie in Phase 5. I don't know how many people realize that Phase 5 is about to be over. Thunderbolts is the last Phase 5 movie.
Yep.
Somehow we're already here, and we're moving into Phase 6 next year, or excuse me, this year. The first Phase 6 movie is the Fantastic Four First Steps, followed by Avengers Doomsday, the Untitled Spider-Man 4 movie that's going to be coming out in 2026, and then Secret Wars in 2027. I still feel like that there's probably at least one unannounced project in there somewhere. I do think that they have a date slotted in 2027 that's been untitled right now. So I think that there's probably at least one more movie in there, but I'm concerned. I brought up the point earlier that this feels like it might be rock bottom. And again, I'm negating those few wins that we've gotten. Deadpool and Wolverine, that's a Ryan Reynolds production. That's an old Fox movie. The Spider-Man No Way Home conclusion, that is leveraging 20 years of Spider-Man mythology and lore and history. James Gunn with Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 3, it's James Gunn. Like, these are all exceptions. But when you look at the true, tried and traditional MCU movies, like Captain America Brave New World, like the Marvels, like Ant-Man and the Wasp Quantumania, like Eternals, just by and large, a lot of these just aren't working for people. They aren't working for me. They aren't working for critics, especially. And the money is also not accumulating as quickly and stacking up as fast as it used to. And we are now in the final stretch of all of this. We're in the home stretch of what this whole big narrative has been about for the past 6 years, this multiverse saga, quote unquote. And we're going into two big Avengers movies led by the Russos. Robert Downey Jr. coming back as Dr. Doom. I mean, what is the state of things? Like, what happens with these next movies? Like, how important are these next movies? I know we have this conversation often, but how important are these next movies? If they don't nail them, is it just like completely over? Is it over as we speak right now? Like, where are we at with the MCU and how things stand post Captain America Brave New World?
I do believe we have hit rock bottom, but because we know more movies are coming out, it's not like they're just about to stop right now. Because you know more movies are coming out, of course I think these next movies are more important than they've ever been. There has to be a streak. There is no way they cannot be streaky here. You can't have anything fall by the wayside at all. In fact, Daredevil has to be good first. In fact, that's like the let's make Daredevil good first. Let's make sure we can get that working. We have to get Fantastic Four working. We have Doomsday. It has to be a banger. It does. It does not have room to be just okay. I think. I don't even. I don't even think it can feel like. I think how a lot of people feel like Age of Ultron is just like was like to a lot of people, which is like man. I don't think it can be that. I don't. I think it has to be fire. I think it has to be really good. And I think we're now in a moment where it's I forgot what movie that's from. It was like Nut Up or Shut Up. What movie is that? I can't even remember. But yeah, man, it's they had They have to bring it. There's no more losing. We can't have Captain America. We can't have Quantumania. We can't have the Marvels. We can't have any of those films. We can't have Eternals. We can't have Black Widow. We can't be on this level of the MCU anymore in order for them, I think, to climb their way back up the ranks. Because you know what? Not only is that them looking at themselves, but there might be some people that's whispering in their ear that's trying to take over in DC. Again, Superman ain't came out yet. It hasn't happened, but competition supposedly is ramping up. They can't afford to let that happen. They can't. Once we seen how DC has quote unquote lost the battle over the years, and it very easily could flip very quickly. So yeah, man, they have to get it together. They actually don't have a choice, or else this is and will be the end of the MCU. These next movies are more important than they've ever been. I know we've said that over and over, but this is like for real, 1,000 mega%. There's no more room for error. At least for me, maybe for me personally, I'm like, one of the biggest Marvel enthusiasts you'll meet, comic book enthusiasts you'll meet. I'm supposed to be excited about this stuff. The fact that some of that stuff has dwindled over time, and the way how I feel about these movies, I definitely shouldn't be here. You know what I'm saying? So it's just too bad, so sad, but they got to get it together right now. The state of the MCU is rock bottom.
And what if they do fail? Like, what if I mean, you know, we've had this conversation over and over.
Good.
What if they do fail? What supplants them? What becomes the most important movie going experience for people? Because it wouldn't be the comic book movie anymore. And this is not even squarely on the shoulders of Marvel. This entire genre has sucked ass for the past 5 years in particular. It's been really, 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 really fucking bad. The year we just came off of, 2024, get the fuck out of here. Joker, Folie à Deux, Venom, Craven, Madam Web. What are we even talking about anymore? And then you add on these mediocre efforts from the MCU, who's supposed to be the reliable brand of all of it. And then DC hasn't gotten their act together in a decade, and we're just hoping and waiting and crossing our fingers that James Gunn is going to get it together. So what then becomes the dominant attraction at the box office if everything, and I'm always going to be the person to say this, but if everything that Martin Scorsese turned out to be true that he said all those years ago, like if we get to that place where it's like, guys, it's over, like it's a wrap. What next? What do we have to look forward to after this point?
James Cameron.
Every 12 years, James Cameron. Every fucking generation, one movie is gonna have to hold us over, guys. Oh
no, that's really gonna be cinema though. It really is gonna be those big blockbuster filmmakers. It's literally gonna be Villeneuve, Nolan, Cameron. Like that's gonna be the thing
maybe Greta.
That people look forward to. Greta, yeah, that's
Coogler.
It. Like, it's moving, and in some ways, that's kind of a good thing. Like we kind of move out from the idea of superhero genre and back into big blockbuster films as a concept, because that is a concept within itself.
And filmmakers.
And I think we are moving back in that way slowly but surely, right? Like Oppenheimer proved that, Barbie proved that, Dune kind of proved that. Like we are kind of slowly moving back into that feel of filmmakers and big blockbusters and what they can be. But yeah, man, I think and before it felt like superhero films not only led that, but we're attached to that too. But now it's like it's slowly being fizzled out. Like that superhero is starting to go away, but those things are still remaining. So I think that's exactly what's about to happen if they don't get it together. And I think they are smart and fortunate to say, hey, Russos, let's go do that thing. You know what I'm saying? Big blockbuster, big ensemble film. Let's go do that thing again. Because that is what's hot right now too. Like happens to be two things happening at the same time, but that's also what they need. So yeah, that's the only thing I can think of.
So right now, as we stand, the dynasty is over. Like that's a wrap. That is, we're putting a period and a button on that. Can they get back to being a dynasty? Yes, that is possible. But any great sports team, like if they win a lot of championships and they go on a run, sometimes they have a lapse period, maybe or maybe not. They'll get back to that place of glory. I think the MCU is
the
right.
Patriots.
Yeah, exactly. It took 10 years for Tom Brady and the Patriots to get back to the Super Bowl after that first three-peat, right? And so sometimes that has to be the case, and that can be possible. And I think that that's where we are right now. There is no dynasty right now. They've not accumulated enough wins and enough successes for people to say, like, yeah, that's the dominant force at the box office right now. It's all been extremely inconsistent. In hindsight, it's extremely 2020, so I'm going to acknowledge that and be aware of that. But I want to say this.
Yeah.
The idea that after the conclusion of the Infinity Saga and Avengers Endgame, the idea that we can continue this and to make this as successful as those first 23 films was extremely misguided. Like there was just never any way that they could follow that up. When you have a conclusion of that scale, of that level, a blow off that pays off in that way, the idea to just press forward and do more, it's almost kind of ridiculous when you think about it. It's such a perfect ending to what they accomplished and to what they did. To do more after that and to say, like, we're not going to at least take off a significant amount of time and then come back, it was a mistake. It's no doubt about it. It was a mistake. They should have taken off 5 years to just say, we're going back to the fucking drawing board. That was the end. That was the crescendo. That was the payoff. That was the series finale. I can go on and on and on. Avengers Endgame was it. It always will be it, guys. Like, we just have to get used to that concept. Like, the expectations at the levels that that movie reached were just far exceeded anything that I think anybody could have ever predicted.
Yeah.
And so this position that they're in now might have just always been inevitable, but there could have been things that have been done along the way, I think, to prevent just some of this bad reception, some of this bad negative goodwill. Like if we taken time off, if we slowed down on projects, so many things that we've discussed on this podcast. But now that we are in the position that we are in, and the train will not stop, and they're going to keep going. I mean, the next five.
Yeah.
I mean, we need the next 5.
Yeah.
Like all 5. Yeah. We need the next 5 to just be like,
I agree.
That worked. And they have to be bare minimum really good to just like great. Yes, we love them. A lot of acclaim, a lot of money, a lot of success for us to, I think, to even get that enthusiasm back. Otherwise, MCU, please, after we get past these Avengers movies, just stop and just start over. Just scrap all of it. Just start over. Build this shit from the ground up with the mutants and the X-Men. I would just like that. Let's just go back to square one. I think we can get there if it just doesn't work out in that way, because right now they have just put so much pressure on themselves, I think, in order to deliver something that people are going to walk away from thinking and comparing to what previously was achieved with the Infinity Saga. And that's an unrealistic expectation. It's not going to happen. The Infinity Saga is singular. It'll never be replicated, never be duplicated, not even by Marvel. But what they can do is just try to deliver some really, really good movies to come close. You know, you can be that 98 Bulls team, but you can't be that 96 Bulls team. Like you're not going to get 70 wins. You might get 64 and get a championship, but you're not going to come to that great level. And so I think that's the best we can hope for. But these next 5 movies they're gonna be extremely, extremely important. Any final thoughts on Captain America: Brave New World before we wrap up today and proceed forward and move on? I guess with the rest of the MCU as we get towards Phase 6 over the course of the next couple of movies.
Nah, man, no thoughts. That's I think we said everything. I think that's really it. These next couple movies are more important than they've ever have been. We have hit rock bottom. It's time to get it together. There's some things on the horizon that I think that need to be proven on both the DC side, the Marvel. All superhero films are in the dumps right now, and it's going to take a lot of proving, I think, to earn the trust of people back. But right now, superhero movies are officially not it. This was the movie that could have, that could save me from saying those words that we've hit rock bottom. But nope, unfortunately, this movie instead is the indicator that we have hit rock bottom, man. So no, that's all I got to say. It's time to get it together.
I guess if it is rock bottom, theoretically, there's no place to go but up. But I'm even fearful to say those words because there's always a more bottom. There can always be a lower low. Hopefully we don't see that, but let's see if we can get things back in shape. But folks, those are all of our thoughts on the 35th feature film in the MCU, Captain America: Brave New World. If you checked out this movie, hit us up and let us know what you think.